In the shadow of temples, beneath ancient scripture, and carved into forgotten stone, there are questions that still whisper through time. Mysteries that no prayer, no prophecy, no doctrine has ever truly explained. A bleeding statue in a quiet chapel, a fireproof monk walking unharmed through flame, symbols found across continents, etched by hands that never met. Are these miracles, or messages we were never meant to understand? For centuries, faith has offered answers, but it has also raised impossibilities. Why do sacred texts contain numbers that align with astronomical events? How can relics appear where history says they should not exist? And what truly happened during the moments the heavens were said to open? Tonight, we won't seek belief. We'll seek the unknown, the unexplained, the sacred puzzles left behind by prophets, pilgrims, and time itself. So sit back, relax, and let's dive deep into the world of unexplained religious mysteries, where the line between divine and impossible begins to blur. In a dimly lit cathedral in Turin, Italy, behind layers of bulletproof glass and guarded by silence, lies a relic that has stirred hearts, minds, and debates for centuries. It is long, linen, and pale, measuring over 14 feet in length. Faint, almost ghostly, the image of a man is pressed into its fibers. His body bears marks of torment, scourge wounds across the back, blood from a crown of thorns, and the stain of nails driven through the wrists and feet. This is the Shroud of Turin, one of the most studied, most controversial, and most enigmatic religious artifacts in human history. It is not the cloth itself that captures attention, but the figure it appears to bear, a front and back imprint of a crucified man. For many, it resembles Jesus of Nazareth, and for believers, it is nothing less than a sacred photograph, an imprint left behind by the resurrection itself. But what exactly is the shroud? A medieval forgery? A miracle of divine origin? Or something else entirely? The shroud first emerged into the public record in the 14th century in Lirey, France, when it was displayed by a French knight, Geoffroy de Charny. From the moment it was revealed, it inspired devotion and suspicion. Even a local bishop questioned its authenticity. It was not until the shroud found a home in Turin in the late 1500s that its reputation as a holy relic began to solidify. Yet the mystery deepens when science enters the frame. In 1898, an Italian lawyer and amateur photographer, Secondo Pia, took the first photographs of the shroud. When he developed the negatives, he saw something unexpected. The image appeared as a positive in the photographic negative. It was more detailed, more human. The faint stains on the cloth transformed into the haunting face of a suffering man. This discovery stunned the world and reignited both religious awe and scientific scrutiny. But how was the image formed? This question remains unanswered. It is not painted, no brushstrokes, no pigments, no dyes. The image is a surface discoloration that only affects the topmost fibers of the cloth. It resists replication, even with modern technology. Attempts to reproduce the image using heat, light, acid, or other substances have fallen short. It is not three-dimensional in the traditional sense, yet digital analysis of the image reveals depth, shading that corresponds to the contours of a human body. How could this have been achieved in the Middle Ages? In 1988, a carbon dating test seemed to end the debate. Laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona tested samples of the shroud and concluded with confidence. The fabric dated from 1260 to 1390 AD. A medieval creation. A Hamisittvani. Case closed. But it wasn't. Critics soon raised concerns about the samples used. Were they taken from a repaired corner of the cloth, contaminated by centuries of handling and exposure to fire and water? The shroud had survived at least one documented fire in 1532, during which molten silver from its reliquary burned holes through the fabric. Nuns patched the damage, possibly using different threads that could have skewed the carbon results. More recent analyses, including spectral imaging, pollen studies, and textile comparisons, have suggested the shroud may be much older than carbon dating indicates. And then there's the question of the blood. Studies of the reddish stains on the cloth show the presence of hemoglobin and other components consistent with human blood. The wounds correspond with Roman methods of crucifixion. Anatomically, the figure is convincing, too convincing, some argue, for a forger of the 13th or 14th century who would have had limited medical or anatomical knowledge. Could someone in the medieval period have faked such detailed physiological realism? And if so, why? There are also historical trails, barely visible, that hint the shroud may have existed long before its official debut in France. Byzantine art from as early as the 6th century shows strikingly similar depictions of Christ: long hair, elongated nose, and distinctive wounds. Some scholars believe the cloth was once housed in Constantinople, and may be the same relic referred to in Eastern Christian texts as the image of Edessa or the Mandylion. Could the Shroud of Turin be the missing link in a long chain of sacred artifacts, misidentified or hidden during centuries of war and upheaval? And yet, even if it is ancient, does that make it genuine? Skeptics argue that mystery does not equal authenticity. The absence of explanation does not prove divinity. Others point to the powerful psychological and emotional impact of the image, suggesting that belief may be fueling perception. The human brain is adept at finding faces, at interpreting patterns, at drawing meaning from ambiguity. Still, the shroud endures. It is rarely displayed, only a handful of times per century. But when it is, millions gather to see it. Pilgrims kneel in silence. Scientists return with new tools. Believers see the face of Christ. Others see a puzzle still unsolved. What is it about this cloth that defies explanation? Why does it still provoke questions that science cannot fully answer and faith cannot prove? And more curiously, what if both are right in ways we don't yet understand? Perhaps the mystery of the Shroud of Turin is not only about its origin, but about us, our longing to connect with something eternal, our need to find traces of the sacred in the physical world, our search for the boundary where the material meets the divine. And so, the cloth rests in its chamber in Turin, silent, still, and waiting. For the next question, for the next discovery. For the moment someone dares to ask not just what it is, but why it still matters. The trail of mystery does not end with the shroud. In fact, it grows heavier, more ancient, as we shift our gaze toward a relic so powerful, so revered, that its very mention stirs awe and fear alike. Deep in the heart of biblical history, surrounded by centuries of silence and myth, lies one of the most enduring enigmas of the ancient world, the Ark of the Covenant. Described in the Book of Exodus, the Ark was no ordinary artifact. It was built of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, an ornate chest topped with 2 cherubim whose wings met at the center. But it was not the craftsmanship that granted it significance. According to Scripture, the Ark held within it the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, the sacred covenant between God and the Israelites. More than a container, it was a vessel of divine presence. It led armies to victory. It split rivers. It struck the unrighteous dead. And then, it vanished. Today, the Ark's location remains unknown. There is no grave, no ruin, no confirmed artifact, only stories, whispers, traces, and like the desert winds that once swept through the tabernacle in the wilderness, the truth seems to shift and scatter the closer one gets. The last known mention of the Ark appears in the Hebrew Bible during the reign of King Josiah around the 7th century BC. After that, the silence is deafening. Did the Babylonians destroy it when they sacked the first temple in Jerusalem in 586 BC? Or was it hidden, spirited away before the invaders arrived, concealed by priests or prophets who foresaw the devastation to come? Many believe the ark was taken to a place of absolute secrecy. In Ethiopia, high in the hills of Axum, monks of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church claim the ark rests within the chapel of the tablet, a modest stone structure watched over day and night by a solitary guardian who, once chosen, may never leave its grounds. No one is permitted to view the ark, no photographs, no independent verification. And yet, the claim endures, passed down through generations as sacred truth. Could it be real? And if so, how did it travel from ancient Jerusalem to the Ethiopian highlands? One theory suggests that Jewish priests fled south with the ark during the reign of King Manasseh, a time of idolatry and religious upheaval. Some propose that it was taken down the Nile, hidden in Elephantine, or carried into Egypt and beyond. Ethiopian tradition aligns with this idea, telling of a union between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, whose son, Menelik, is said to have journeyed to Jerusalem and returned with the ark in secret, guided by angels or divine command. Skeptics, of course, point to the lack of archaeological evidence. No ancient trail, no inscriptions, no confirmed sightings. The chapel in Axum has never opened its doors to scholarly inquiry. Still, the legend refuses to fade. Other stories lead elsewhere. Some say the ark lies buried beneath the Temple Mount in a sealed chamber untouched for millennia, beyond the reach of modern excavations due to both religious sensitivity and political tension. Others speculate that the Knights Templar, during their occupation of Jerusalem in the Crusades, discovered the ark and smuggled it into Europe, where it remains hidden beneath cathedrals or castles. There are even claims linking it to secret Vatican archives or long-lost crypts in Rome. And then there are the more esoteric theories. Was the ark more than just a chest? Some researchers and fringe theorists alike have suggested that its powers, described as lethal, radiant, and awe-inducing, may hint at something beyond the symbolic. Was it an ancient energy device? A technological artifact from a civilization lost to time? These theories stretch the imagination, but they speak to something deeper. The human urge to understand the sacred not just as myth, but as something real, tangible, physical. But even within tradition, the ark is more than gold and wood. It represents covenant, obedience, and the terrifying proximity of the divine. According to the texts, when the ark was carried improperly, men died. When it was captured, misfortune followed its captors. And when it was finally brought to Jerusalem by King David, it was done with trembling reverence and ritual. What does it mean that such a powerful object, if it ever existed, could vanish so completely? The Ark of the Covenant is not merely a relic. It is a mirror of our longing, for proof, for presence, for the divine to leave a trace upon the earth. We dig, we search, we theorize, hoping that in discovering the Ark, we might bridge the chasm between the known and the unknowable. But perhaps that is the mystery. Perhaps the Ark was never meant to be found, not in the material sense. Perhaps its story was designed to test not our archaeology, but our belief. And so, the Ark remains lost, or hidden, or waiting. Somewhere between myth and memory, between stone and spirit. Its silence speaks louder than words, and in that silence, one must wonder, if the Ark still exists, what would happen if it were found? Would we recognize it? Or has its true power always been in what it makes us question? What is the Ark of the Covenant, really? a lost artifact of the ancient world, or something far more enduring, the mystery of faith itself, sealed in gold and guarded by time. From the Ark of the Covenant to another vessel of profound mystery, we move not from gold to stone, but to something far more elusive, something that may never have been touched by fire or blade, but has burned through the hearts of seekers for centuries. It is not always described the same way. It has no fixed shape, no confirmed origin. And yet, across continents and centuries, the same name echoes like a sacred riddle: the Holy Grail. A simple cup, perhaps, or a relic of divine power, or something far stranger. Legends speak of a vessel used by Jesus at the Last Supper, a chalice passed from hand to trembling hand, filled with wine and heavy with meaning. Later, it is said, this same cup caught his blood as he hung on the cross. That act, mysterious, reverent, almost mythic, transformed an ordinary object into one of the most sought-after treasures in human history. But where is it? Did it ever exist? The earliest Christian texts make no mention of the Grail. The Gospels speak of a cup, yes, but not as an object of power or veneration. The transformation begins much later, centuries after the life of Jesus. In the 12th century, the poet Chrétien de Troyes penned a romance that would change everything. Percival, the story of the Grail. Suddenly, the Grail became a symbol of divine mystery, guarded in a distant castle, revealed only to the pure of heart. This was not history. It was allegory, infused with the language of knights and quests, of trials and revelations. But legends have a way of bleeding into belief. Over time, the Grail's mythos deepened. It became the ultimate prize in Arthurian tales, the goal of the faithful, the obsession of kings. But even as the stories grew more fantastic, some began to wonder, was there a kernel of truth behind the myth? Several churches and cathedrals across Europe claim to possess the true Grail. In Valencia, Spain, a simple stone cup, known as the Santo Cáliz, is displayed in a Gothic chapel. Carbon dating suggests that the cup itself may date to the 1st century BC, aligning with the time of Jesus. Its base, however, is clearly medieval. Could this be the real cup, passed down, modified, and preserved in secret? In England, some point to Glastonbury, a place steeped in both Christian tradition and Arthurian legend. According to local lore, Joseph of Arimathea brought the Grail to this land after the crucifixion, hiding it near what would become Glastonbury Abbey. The supposed site of the holy thorn tree and the famed chalice well are said to mark the Grail's resting place, its waters tinted red by the blood it once held. Yet archaeological evidence remains elusive, and the stories drift between history and hallowed myth. Other theories trace the Grail not to a single cup, but to a lineage, a symbol, or even an idea. Some believe the Grail was never a physical object at all, but a metaphor for enlightenment, for divine union, or for hidden knowledge preserved by secret societies. In the 20th century, such ideas took hold in popular imagination. Books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and later the Da Vinci Code proposed that the Grail symbolized the bloodline of Christ, a living heritage concealed beneath centuries of church doctrine and power. Was the Grail a cup or a child? This theory, though largely speculative, raises difficult questions. Why did the Church suppress certain texts? What truths may lie within the Gnostic Gospels, the Dead Sea Scrolls, or the apocryphal traditions that diverge from canonical scripture? And if the Grail was indeed something to be hidden, not venerated, what were people trying to protect? Others have pointed beyond Europe, suggesting the Grail may have roots in older, pre-Christian traditions. The Celts spoke of cauldrons of rebirth. The Persians told tales of sacred vessels that held divine light. Might the Grail be a symbol that predates Christianity, absorbed and reinterpreted by medieval writers seeking to bridge myth and faith? Or perhaps it is all simpler and more haunting. Perhaps the Grail was just a cup, an ordinary object made extraordinary by the moment it witnessed, a moment that changed the course of spiritual history. In that case, could it have been preserved? Hidden by early followers? Could it still exist, tucked away in a monastery, a vault, a cave, waiting? No discovery has confirmed it. No archaeologist has held it in their hands. But the search continues, not just for a relic, but for what it represents: purity, purpose, revelation. The Holy Grail is not merely an object, it is a question carved into the fabric of faith. Why has this one image, a cup, a vessel, endured across centuries and cultures? Why do so many still search for it? Is it because we hope to find a link to the divine in the physical world? Or is it because the very act of seeking makes us feel closer to something eternal? Whatever the answer, the Grail remains just out of reach, always glimpsed through story, hinted at in stone, whispered in water, and carved into dreams. And as long as there are questions we cannot answer, as long as there is mystery in belief, the search will never truly end. Could it be that the Grail was never meant to be found, but only followed? From the silent sanctuaries of Glastonbury to the shadowed relic halls of European cathedrals, the search for sacred objects often leads us deeper, not only into history, but into power. And few relics carry such a dark, magnetic allure as the one said to have pierced divinity itself, the Spear of Destiny. Also known as the Holy Lance, it is a weapon of paradox, a brutal tool of death, and yet revered as a sacred object. According to the Gospel of John, as Jesus hung upon the cross, a Roman soldier drove a spear into his side to confirm his death. Blood and water flowed from the wound, and the crucifixion, it seemed, was complete. The soldier is named in later tradition as Longinus, and from this moment, both violent and prophetic, emerged a legend that would echo through empires. But what became of the spear? The relic claimed to be the true Holy Lance now lies in the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, Austria, displayed behind glass, set in iron and gold. To the unknowing eye, it appears unremarkable, weathered metal, centuries old. Yet for hundreds of years, this spear has been guarded, studied, and feared. Emperors knelt before it, conquerors sought it, and some believed that whoever held it would shape the fate of the world. The idea that the Spear of Destiny grants divine authority, victory in battle, dominion over nations, did not arise in isolation. It was said to have been in the possession of Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor of Rome. With it, he won the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD and began his transformation of the empire into a Christian power. Later, Charlemagne was said to have wielded the spear, never losing a battle while it remained in his grasp. When he died, the spear slipped from his fingers, and his empire soon began to fracture. But can an object truly shape the course of history? Or is belief in its power enough to make it real? By the Middle Ages, multiple churches claimed possession of the true lance. One emerged in Antioch during the First Crusade, found buried beneath the altar of a cathedral. Another appeared in Paris, a third in Armenia. Yet it is the spear in Vienna that has attracted the most attention and controversy. This spear, known as the Hofburg Lance, first appeared in historical records in the 8th century. It became a prized symbol of the Holy Roman Emperors, passed down through generations, always present at imperial coronations. It became more than a weapon, it was a relic of legitimacy. And as the centuries progressed, it took on an aura of prophecy. In the modern era, its shadow darkened. According to several historical accounts, Adolf Hitler viewed the Spear of Destiny during his youth in Vienna. Decades later, After the annexation of Austria in 1938, the spear was seized by the Nazis and transferred to Nuremberg, alongside other imperial regalia. Some have speculated that Hitler believed in its power, that he saw himself as the latest in a line of conquerors destined to wield it. Whether true or not, the symbolism was potent and chilling. At the end of World War II, American forces recovered the spear and returned it to Vienna. But the mystery lingers. Could a relic tied to such myth and bloodshed carry more than symbolic weight? Skeptics point to metallurgy. Scientific analysis has suggested that the Hofburg lance may not date back to the 1st century AD, but rather to the early Middle Ages. Its tip, however, contains a nail, believed by some to be one of the original nails of the crucifixion, embedded centuries later. But as with so many relics, no definitive proof exists. Only fragments, only stories. And then there are the stranger theories. Some esoteric traditions claim the spear was not merely a Roman weapon, but a conduit, an instrument that pierced not only flesh, but the veil between worlds. They speak of hidden energies, of ancient rites, of connections to other artifacts of power. Others suggest that the spear's power lies not in metal or blood, but in its role as a symbol of the intersection between violence and holiness, between empire and sacrifice. What does it mean to hold the weapon that ended a messianic life? Is it a relic of sin or of salvation? Across time, the Holy Lance has served as a mirror for those who seek control over the world, as well as those who seek understanding. Some see in it divine justice, others a curse. But whether sacred or superstition, it continues to draw attention, to demand reverence or fear. Why do certain objects, simple, ancient, forged in pain, seem to carry the weight of history? And if power can be transferred from story to symbol, what happens when belief and ambition collide? The Spear of Destiny rests once more in Vienna, quiet behind glass, its edge dulled by time, but its legend undiminished. And still, it invites the question, echoing through churches and battlefields, from Golgotha to empire. If you held it in your hand, what would you become? From relics of metal and wood, from objects believed to hold divine power, we now turn our attention to something far more elusive. Not a physical artifact, but an absence. A silence in the historical record so profound, so unsettling, that it has sparked centuries of speculation. It is not about what we see, but what we don't. The missing years of Jesus of Nazareth, a mystery not etched in stone, but in the blank spaces between words. The Gospels tell the story of a miraculous birth, a brief moment in the temple at age 12, and then nothing. Nothing until he appears again around the age of 30, baptized in the Jordan River, ready to begin a ministry that would change the course of history. 18 years, unaccounted for. 18 years in which the central figure of Christianity disappears from the page. Where did he go? What was he doing? And why does no one say? Some scholars argue there is nothing mysterious about this gap at all, that Jesus, like many young men of his time, lived a quiet life in Nazareth, working as a carpenter, supporting his family, waiting for the appointed time. The silence, they say, is not suspicious. It is simply the absence of drama, the space between childhood and destiny. But for others, that silence speaks louder than words. Could a life so transformative, so filled with wisdom and radical teaching, truly have emerged in isolation from a quiet village in Galilee? Or might those years have taken him far from home, across deserts, mountains, and empires, in search of knowledge that would shape his mission? One of the most enduring theories suggests that Jesus traveled east, to Persia, to India, even to Tibet. In these lands, ancient spiritual traditions had already been flourishing for centuries. Some believe he studied with Zoroastrian priests, or immersed himself in the teachings of Hindu mystics and Buddhist monks. In the northern Indian region of Ladakh, a monastery in Hemis holds scrolls that some claim refer to a saintly figure named Isra, a teacher from the West who preached compassion, healed the sick, and was ultimately persecuted by his own people. The life of Saint Isra, first reported by a Russian traveler named Nicholas Notovich in the 19th century, stirred global fascination, but it was quickly dismissed by many scholars as a fabrication. Others insisted the monastery held no such documents, or that they had been hidden after foreign interest intensified. To this day, no verifiable manuscript has been produced, and yet, the story persists. Could Jesus have encountered the spiritual philosophies of the East? Some point to similarities between his teachings and those found in Buddhism or Vedanta: parables, emphasis on inner purity, renunciation of material wealth, and the call to love even one's enemies. Are these echoes of personal experience, or simply convergences of wisdom across cultures? Other theories keep him closer to home. The Essenes, a mystical Jewish sect that lived in the Judean wilderness near Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, may have influenced his thinking. The Essenes practiced asceticism, ritual purification, and a deep devotion to prophecy. Could Jesus have spent time among them, studying ancient texts and preparing for the mission that lay ahead? Still others suggest travels to Egypt, where early Christian traditions claim the Holy Family once sought refuge. Ancient Alexandria was a crossroads of thought, home to Jewish philosophers, Greek mystics, and the remnants of Egyptian religious wisdom. Could Jesus have wandered those libraries and temples as a young man, learning to speak to many worlds with a single voice? None of these ideas are proven. Most are rejected by mainstream historians. And yet, the allure remains. Why? Because the teachings that emerged from this silent period were unlike anything seen before. A message not of vengeance, but of grace. Not of empire, but of inner transformation. From where did this come? If Jesus did remain in Nazareth, what did he learn in that quiet place? Were there teachers, scrolls, conversations long since lost to time? Or was the silence itself the teacher? Was he shaped not by distant travel, but by solitude and contemplation, by the rhythms of village life, by the struggle of ordinary people? And why do the Gospels leave this space unfilled? Some suggest it was deliberate, that the early writers, focused on the divine mission, saw no reason to dwell on the ordinary. Others believe stories of those years once existed, perhaps in now-lost texts, apocryphal writings buried by time or doctrine. What truths might have been erased, not through conspiracy, but through centuries of copying, compiling, and choosing? Even within early Christianity, different communities held different stories. Some of the Gnostic Gospels hint at a Jesus more esoteric, more mystical, shaped by inner revelation rather than external tradition. Is it possible that the missing years reflect not just a gap in biography, but a conflict of memory, a disagreement about who Jesus truly was? Ultimately, the mystery remains unsolved. A stretch of life that may never be recovered, not in parchment or ruins, but in imagination. Yet perhaps that is why it endures. Because the missing years of Jesus do not just belong to the past. They exist now, as a space for wonder, for questions not easily answered, for paths not yet walked. What lies in those lost years? Silence? Or a secret journey that shaped the most enigmatic teacher the world has ever known? And if the truth still waits to be found, where would we even begin to look? As we step away from the silence of the lost years, we enter a place marked not by absence, but by fragments, by sacred splinters that claim to carry the weight of history, pain, and redemption. Scattered across cathedrals, hidden in reliquaries, embedded in jeweled crosses and golden altars, these fragments tell a story of suffering, salvation, and mystery. They are said to be pieces of the true cross, the very wood upon which Jesus of Nazareth was crucified. But can a wooden cross survive the centuries? And if so, how can we ever know what is truly true? According to Christian tradition, the cross was discovered in the early 4th century, nearly 300 years after the crucifixion. The Roman Empire had shifted. Christianity, once persecuted, was rising. It was then that Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine, journeyed to Jerusalem with a mission: to find the physical traces of Christ's passion. The story, preserved by early church historians, tells of a miraculous discovery. Near the site of what would become the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Helena is said to have uncovered 3 crosses buried beneath layers of earth and rubble. Unsure which one had belonged to Jesus, a test was arranged. A dying woman was brought forth, and when she touched one of the crosses, she was healed. That cross was declared Vera Crux, the true cross. From there, the story takes flight. Portions of the cross were enshrined in Jerusalem, while others were sent to Constantinople and Rome. Over time, pieces were divided and shared, sent to churches and monarchs across Europe. By the medieval period, relics of the true cross had become some of the most venerated and contested objects in Christendom. But this is where mystery begins to mingle with doubt. By the 16th century, skeptics such as the Protestant reformer John Calvin mocked the sheer number of relics. If all the fragments were collected, he wrote, they would fill a ship. Was the true cross endlessly divisible? Or had faith opened the door for imitation? Modern scholars have attempted to trace the path of these relics, but the trail is fractured, obscured by centuries of war, looting, and devotion. Some pieces were lost during the fall of Constantinople in 1204. Others were seized during the Crusades or hidden during the Reformation. A fragment housed in the Sainte-Chapelle in Paris disappeared during the French Revolution. And yet, others remain, tucked into reliquaries in Rome, Venice, Brussels, and even small chapels in remote villages. Could any of them be real? Scientific analysis is difficult. Most relics are considered too sacred to test. When tests are permitted, they reveal only so much. A sliver of ancient wood, a trace of resin, perhaps dating back to the right period, perhaps not. But even if a fragment is old, how do we prove it bore the weight of a crucifixion, or that it stood on Golgotha beneath a darkened sky? Some believers argue that it doesn't matter. The true cross is not just wood, it is symbol, presence, mystery. Others, more critical, wonder whether the whole story of Helena's discovery was a theological construction designed to anchor Christianity's physical presence in Jerusalem and legitimize the growing empire of faith. And yet, there are curious details. Helena's pilgrimage did occur. She did commission churches on sacred ground. And archaeological excavations beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre have revealed ancient Roman-era structures that align with biblical descriptions. Could there be some truth beneath the legend? Fragments of history embedded in tradition? Some even suggest that parts of the cross were hidden deliberately, sealed within walls, buried beneath altars, spirited away by secret orders during times of persecution. In these versions of the story, the true cross never disappeared. It simply went underground, waiting to be revealed again. There are stranger theories still, claims that the cross was made not of ordinary wood, but from a special tree planted at the dawn of time. Some legends trace its lineage through Eden, Noah's Ark, and Solomon's Temple. These are not historical accounts, but sacred myths, intended not to document, but to evoke wonder. And yet, they remind us how deeply the idea of the cross runs, not just through theology, but through imagination. What is it about the cross that moves people to tears, to pilgrimage, to war. Perhaps it is the paradox it represents, an instrument of death transformed into a symbol of hope, a tool of empire, remade as a sign of redemption. To possess even a piece of it, real or not, is to feel close to something immense, something that touched both suffering and salvation. Today, countless churches still claim to house fragments of the true cross. Some are no larger than a splinter, displayed in golden cases, kissed by pilgrims, guarded by priests. Others lie forgotten in old reliquaries, their provenance obscured by time. And in Jerusalem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre still draws millions, who walk the ancient stones where Helena is said to have knelt in search of wood. But the question lingers, suspended between history and faith. Was the cross ever truly found? Do we walk among its remnants even now? Or are we forever chasing echoes, seeking the sacred not in what survives, but in what we hope to find? Somewhere, perhaps, a fragment lies hidden. Or perhaps the truth has already been scattered, lost to centuries, and only belief remains to hold the pieces together. And if one day the true cross were to be discovered beyond all doubt, what would we do with it? Would we revere it, divide it again, or quietly wonder whether the mystery was stronger in its absence? From splinters of the true cross to whispers of sacred presence, we journey now into a realm where flesh and faith meet in the most intimate way, a world of relics. Not symbols carved in stone, but fragments of human beings, bones, hair, clothing, blood. The remains of those venerated as saints. In gilded reliquaries behind thick glass, in cathedrals echoing with incense and candlelight, these fragments are displayed with solemn reverence. A finger bone enshrined in gold, a skull crowned in silver, a vial said to hold blood that liquefies on sacred days. For centuries, they have drawn pilgrims across continents, seeking healing, hope, connection. But what exactly are these relics? And what do we truly know about them? The veneration of saints' relics stretches deep into Christian tradition. By the 2nd century AD, early Christians were already gathering near the graves of martyrs, believing that their bodies held spiritual power. These were not just memorials, they were seen as conduits between heaven and earth, charged with divine presence. Over time, the practice evolved. Relics were no longer confined to tombs. They were moved, shared, distributed. Churches were built atop burial sites, altars placed directly over bones. By the Middle Ages, nearly every cathedral in Europe claimed at least one sacred relic. Some possessed dozens, even hundreds. The body of a saint was no longer just a body. It became a sacred map, a source of miracles, and, at times, a cause for dispute. But mystery has always clung to these remains. Consider the relic of Saint Catherine of Siena, her incorrupt head kept in Siena, her foot in Venice, and her body in Rome. Or the many churches that claim to hold the bones of Saint John the Baptist, some his arm, some his skull, others fragments with no clear origin. And then there are the more curious claims, the tongue of Saint Anthony, said to have remained pink and supple centuries after death. The heart of Saint Vincent de Paul, still preserved behind glass. The blood of Saint Januarius in Naples, which turns from solid to liquid multiple times a year, defying explanation despite scientific scrutiny. Are these miracles, natural phenomena, or something in between? Modern science has tried to test these relics. Carbon dating, DNA analysis, and historical cross-referencing have been used to examine authenticity. In many cases, results are inconclusive or problematic. Some bones date to the wrong period. Some relics have been duplicated or mislabeled over centuries of devotion, trade, and war. During the medieval period, the demand for relics was so great that forgeries became common. Bones of unknown origin were declared holy, and in some cases, multiple bodies were venerated as the same saint. And yet, the stories persist. Because beyond the question of authenticity lies something deeper. People come to relics not just to see, but to feel. To pray beside a skull believed to belong to St. Thomas Aquinas is to sit near history, near a life once filled with thought and sacrifice. Whether or not the relic is genuine in a forensic sense, the experience is real. The devotion is real. The atmosphere around such places is often palpably still, filled with reverence and quiet hope. But there are stranger aspects to the mystery. Some saints, according to tradition, have resisted decay entirely. The so-called incorruptibles, bodies that remain intact long after death without embalming or preservation. Saints like Bernadette of Lourdes, whose body remains eerily preserved more than a century after her death. In some cases, science attributes this to burial conditions, natural mummification, or wax coatings applied later. In others, explanations fall short. And then there are relics said to possess active power, healing relics, curses tied to disturbed remains, stories of relics weeping oil or exuding fragrance. In Naples, thousands gather when the blood of St. Januarius is said to liquefy. When it fails to do so, fear spreads, interpreted by some as a warning or divine disapproval. In Eastern Orthodox tradition, relics of saints are sometimes found to exude a sweet, unexplainable scent called the odor of sanctity. No chemical source is ever identified. Could these phenomena be psychological, triggered by faith, suggestion, and centuries of ritual? Or could there be something we still don't understand? Some property of matter and spirit that lingers beyond death? Relics have also been used as instruments of power. In medieval Europe, possession of a saint's relic was seen as a sign of divine favor. Cities competed for them. Wars were fought over them. The bones of saints were seen not only as holy, but as strategic, believed to protect cities from plague, invasion, or drought. When relics were stolen, an act euphemistically called holy theft, it was often justified by visions or dreams said to be sent from the saints themselves. But even now, in a secular world, relics endure. They remain locked in chapels, carried in processions, kept in small silver lockets worn by the faithful. They continue to inspire pilgrimages, prayers, and mystery. In some parts of the world, new relics are being created, clothing touched to a saint's tomb, hair saved from holy men and women, items said to have absorbed their presence. The tradition lives on, not as history, but as something still very much alive. And so, we are left with questions. Are these remnants truly what they claim to be? Are they echoes of the sacred, or mirrors of our longing? In a world where science dissects and categorizes, why do we still kneel before bone and cloth? What is it we seek? Healing? Proof? A touch of the eternal? Perhaps the power of relics lies not in what they are, but in what they mean. Perhaps their mystery endures because they invite us to believe that sanctity is not lost in time, that something of the sacred remains, even after death. And perhaps, somewhere, in a dusty reliquary, behind an altar few now visit, a forgotten fragment still waits, a piece of someone once luminous, a whisper of holiness in the silence of a bone. From the sacred remains of saints to something even more extraordinary, our journey now turns toward a mystery that defies the natural order of life and death. In silent chapels and behind glass coffins across Europe and beyond lie bodies untouched by time, faces serene, skin unbroken, limbs preserved in a state that should be impossible. These are the incorruptible bodies, men and women who died centuries ago, yet show little or no signs of decay. To the faithful, they are miracles. To science, they are anomalies. To history, they are a riddle still unresolved. Step into the dim interior of the sanctuary of Saint Bernadette in Nevers, France. There, beneath a crystal coffin, rests the body of a young woman who died in 1879. Saint Bernadette Soubirous, the visionary of Lourdes, appears to be peacefully sleeping. Her hands are folded, her face calm, her skin smooth. More than a century has passed since her burial, yet there is no trace of decomposition. Medical examiners who exhumed her body multiple times noted the absence of odor, the intact organs, the flexibility of her limbs. Or consider the case of Saint Sylvain, whose body lies in the Church of Saint Blaise in Croatia. His skin appears unblemished, his face untouched by time. He died over 1,700 years ago, and yet his body seems preserved far beyond what science would predict for a man of the 4th century AD. How can this be? In Catholic tradition, incorruptibility has long been regarded as a sign of divine favor. The Church does not claim that these bodies are preserved by supernatural means, but it does recognize incorruptibility as one of several signs that may support the sanctity of a person's life. Not every saint is incorrupt, and not every incorrupt body belongs to a canonized saint. But the phenomenon remains deeply embedded in the language of wonder and reverence. Historians have documented cases of incorrupt bodies for over 1,000 years. Most were discovered during exhumations, either to move a saint's remains to a more prominent location or to verify identity during beatification processes. Often, what they found astonished them. Bodies that should have decomposed were instead preserved, whole and supple, their burial garments intact. Could there be natural explanations? In some instances, yes. Scientists point to environmental factors: cool, dry air, mineral-rich soil, sealed tombs with little oxygen. Under certain rare conditions, the body can undergo a natural process of mummification. Others suggest that some bodies were unintentionally preserved by humidity levels, surrounding materials, or the presence of antibacterial agents in the soil. In some cases, intentional embalming was used, though this is generally noted in church records and excluded from claims of incorruptibility. Yet, even with these explanations, some cases continue to puzzle researchers. Take the case of Saint Zita of Lucca, a simple servant girl who died in 1272. Her body was discovered over 300 years later in a near-perfect state, without signs of embalming. Or Saint Catherine Labouré, whose corpse was exhumed in 1933, 57 years after her death, and found with lifelike skin and soft tissue, despite no known preservation techniques. Even more perplexing are reports of bodies exuding a sweet, floral scent, known as the odor of sanctity. In cases where no embalming, favorable climate, or tomb conditions can account for preservation, what remains is mystery. Skeptics caution against jumping to conclusions. They note that public display of incorrupt bodies often involves restoration: wax masks placed over faces, hands touched up with paint, garments changed. In some cases, what appears miraculous is partly the result of human care. But not always. Some bodies have been left untouched and remain in their natural state, free of chemical treatment, yet eerily preserved. What if it's not just the body that resists time, but something about the life that was lived? Many of the incorrupt are individuals who practiced extreme humility, poverty, and spiritual devotion. They were often unknown in their lifetimes, only to be venerated long after death. Could incorruptibility be symbolic, a physical echo of inner purity? Or is it possible that there are biological, even energetic phenomena we do not yet understand? Some fringe theories suggest that incorruptibility may be connected to vibrational states, prolonged meditation, altered consciousness, or alignment with natural frequencies that affect the body even after death. These ideas remain unproven, but they point to a persistent truth. we still do not fully understand what causes the body to decay, or, in these rare cases, to resist decay. Perhaps that is why the incorruptibles remain so compelling. They do not shout, they do not perform signs or wonders, they simply lie still, quiet witnesses to a mystery we cannot solve. What is preserved in these bodies? Is it just flesh, or a trace of something eternal? Do these rare cases point us toward a deeper understanding of life and death, holiness and nature, spirit and matter? Or are they, like so many relics of faith, a question left deliberately unanswered, an invitation to look closer, to sit with wonder, and to imagine that perhaps, even in death, the sacred leaves a mark? In the end, the incorruptibles ask nothing of us. They do not speak. But perhaps they still have something to say. From the stillness of incorrupt bodies, where the sacred seems to resist time itself, we move now to a field in rural Portugal, a place once quiet and unremarkable. Until, one spring morning in 1917, 3 children said they saw something that would echo through history, light descending from the sky, a woman, radiant, standing above the trees, and with her, messages, prophecies, warnings. This is Fatima. A small town north of Lisbon, surrounded by olive groves and open hills, Fatima became the center of one of the most mysterious religious events of the 20th century. It was here that 3 shepherd children, Lucia dos Santos, aged 10, and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, aged 9 and 7, claimed they saw the Virgin Mary, beginning on May 13, 1917. The figure appeared 6 times over the course of that year. She spoke not only of prayer and repentance, but revealed what became known as the 3 Secrets of Fatima, messages shrouded in mystery, later released by the Church in stages, and still the subject of intense debate. What did these children see? Were they touched by the divine, or caught in something deeper, stranger? Witnesses say that on the day of the final apparition, October 13, 1917, a crowd of over 70,000 people gathered. Rain had soaked the ground. The sky was gray. But then, something happened. The rain stopped, the clouds parted, and the sun, according to reports, began to spin. It pulsed with unnatural color. It zigzagged. It danced across the sky. Eyewitnesses described it as falling toward the earth before returning to its place in the sky. This moment, now known as the Miracle of the Sun, was widely reported in Portuguese newspapers. Scientists, skeptics, and believers alike were confounded. Some suggested mass hallucination, a natural meteorological phenomenon, or retinal afterimages. Others were certain this was a sign from heaven. But if the sun's movement stunned the crowd, it was the secrets given to the children that ignited global speculation. The first secret, as later revealed by Sister Lucia in her memoirs, was a vision of hell, a place of fire and despair. The second predicted the end of World War I and the beginning of another, even worse war, if humanity did not repent. It also spoke of the rise of Soviet communism and the persecution of the Church. Both were revealed publicly in 1941. But the third secret? That would remain hidden for nearly 6 decades, locked away by the Vatican, feeding decades of curiosity and conspiracy. What had the Virgin told a 10-year-old girl that was so sensitive it could not be released to the world? For years, speculation swirled. Some believed the third secret predicted a global apocalypse, nuclear war, the fall of the papacy, the collapse of the Church itself. Others suggested it spoke of betrayal from within, or a great deception at the heart of modern faith. It wasn't until the year 2000 that the Vatican finally released what it said was the full text. According to their account, the secret described a vision: a bishop dressed in white, climbing a mountain, passing through a ruined city, praying for the souls of the dead before being killed by soldiers. Alongside him, others, bishops, priests, religious and lay people, all martyred. The Church interpreted this as a symbolic vision of the 20th century's suffering, the 2 world wars, the persecution of Christians, and the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. The bullet that struck him was later placed in the crown of the statue of Our Lady of Fatima. And yet, not everyone was convinced. Some believe the full third secret has never been revealed. They point to inconsistencies in Vatican statements, to documents suggesting that more was written, perhaps a separate, unshared letter. Even Cardinal Ratzinger, before becoming Pope Benedict XVI, once hinted that the unreleased portion might concern dangers to the faith rather than global catastrophe. Was there something the Church withheld? Something too controversial? Too destabilizing? And what of Lucia herself, the only surviving visionary who later became a cloistered nun? She lived until 2005, under the close watch of the Church, rarely speaking publicly. Her writings, while sincere, were always carefully filtered. Did she carry knowledge that could never be shared? Or did the message simply become distorted over time, amplified by those who wanted more from it than what was truly given? There are other mysteries as well. The children, though uneducated and young, spoke of profound theological matters with striking clarity. Both Jacinta and Francisco died young, as the Virgin reportedly foretold. Lucia, meanwhile, lived into her 90s. She once claimed that the full meaning of the Fatima secrets would only become clear in time, suggesting that their relevance might stretch far into the future. To this day, Fatima remains a place of pilgrimage. Millions travel there each year, praying in the Chapel of the Apparitions, lighting candles, walking the same path the children once did. Some come seeking healing, others, answers. But the mystery of Fatima is not just about the past. It continues to speak to the modern world, about the possibility of vision, of message, of something beyond the visible, about the delicate balance between revelation and secrecy. Did 3 children truly receive a warning from heaven? Was the miracle of the sun a sign of divine intervention or mass wonder? And if part of the message remains hidden, what could be so powerful, so urgent, that it had to be sealed away? Perhaps the real mystery is not what was said, but what it continues to inspire. A quiet field in Portugal, transformed by light and silence, still asking a question that has no easy answer. What does it mean when heaven speaks? Just beyond the rolling hills of Fatima, where the olive trees lean in quiet prayer and the air still seems to remember what happened there, lies the Cova da Iria, a field once quiet, now sacred. It was here, on October 13th, 1917, that a crowd of tens of thousands gathered under dark, rain-filled skies. They had come in faith, in fear, and in wonder, drawn by 3 shepherd children who said the Virgin Mary had promised a miracle. What they witnessed would echo through the world, ripple through time, and stir questions that remain unanswered to this day. It became known as the miracle of the sun. Eyewitness accounts vary in detail, but share a haunting similarity. As the rain ceased and the clouds gave way, the sun appeared to burst free from the sky. It spun rapidly, casting waves of color across the landscape: yellow, blue, violet. It shuddered. It pulsed. Then, in a motion that defied every law of nature, it seemed to lurch from the sky, falling toward the earth in a zigzag motion before returning to its place. Some collapsed in fear. Others wept in joy. Many thought it was the end of the world. This was not a private vision. It was witnessed by journalists, skeptics, farmers, clergy, and government officials, people of all kinds, most of whom had no connection to the children or their claims. Estimates of the crowd range from 30,000 to 70,000. Portuguese newspapers, including O Século, reported the event widely. Even those who came to mock left stunned. But what exactly did they see? The church would later declare it a genuine miracle, a confirmation of the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima. Pilgrims came by the millions in the years that followed. A basilica was built. The children were canonized. And yet, the event itself, raw, visual, and public, has continued to resist easy explanation. Could it have been a natural phenomenon? Some scientists have suggested a rare atmospheric event called a parhelion, or sundog, caused by light refracting through ice crystals in the upper atmosphere. Others point to the psychological effect of staring at the sun, which can produce visual distortions, retinal burns, and even hallucinations. But many witnesses described looking away and still seeing the phenomenon reflected across the landscape, and multiple photographers on site failed to capture any distortion on film, suggesting it was not purely optical or internal to the eye. What about mass hysteria? Skeptics argue that anticipation, emotion, and suggestion could have created a kind of shared illusion. After all, the crowd came expecting a miracle. The atmosphere was charged with hope, fear, and spiritual intensity. But would thousands of people, many of them not even believers, hallucinate in unison? And if so, why do their accounts include consistent, concrete details? The spinning, the colors, the drying of soaked clothes and mud-drenched ground. Then, there are the theories that stretch further. Some fringe researchers have posited celestial anomalies, solar flares, electromagnetic events, or even unidentified aerial phenomena. Could there have been something momentary and rare, a convergence of natural forces we still don't understand? Others whisper about messages from beyond, divine or otherwise. Was the sun's movement symbolic, a sign not of nature, but of intervention? One of the most curious aspects of the event was its physicality. The ground, drenched with rain moments before, was reportedly dry after the event. Mud vanished. Clothes that had been soaked were suddenly warm and clean. Witnesses described a sensation of heat, not from the sun, but from something else. If the event was purely visual, how did it alter the environment? And then there is the silence of modern science. Despite decades of inquiry, no conclusive theory has explained the event in terms that satisfy both reason and witness. The Vatican, for its part, does not impose belief in the miracle as a requirement of faith. It acknowledges the event as worthy of devotion, but leaves room for mystery. Perhaps that's what Fatima has always been about. Not proving, but pondering. Not solving, but surrendering to something greater than understanding. What makes the dancing sun so powerful is not just what was seen, but when and how. In the shadow of World War I, in a time of turmoil and uncertainty, thousands gathered in a field. And something happened, something that challenged their senses, their fears, and their understanding of the heavens. Was it divine? Was it psychological? Was it a moment when time bent slightly, and the boundary between heaven and earth grew thin? Or is it possible that the miracle still lingers, not in the sky, but in the question itself? The sun no longer spins above Fatima, but the memory remains. The field is quiet again, but beneath its silence lies a ripple that refuses to fade. And as we look upward, as others once did on that gray October day, we are left to wonder, what did they see? What really happened when the sun danced in the sky? And what if, even now, it's still dancing, just beyond the reach of our reason? As the echoes of Fatima fade into the realm of light and sky, we now travel to a very different kind of sacred mystery, one rooted not in visions or prophecy, but in stone. In the heart of the great mosque of Mecca, surrounded by the constant, circling movement of millions of pilgrims, sits a small object of immense reverence. Set into the southeastern corner of the Kaaba, it is dark, smooth, and worn by countless touches. This is the black stone, Al-Hajar al-Aswad, a relic so ancient, so enigmatic, that its true origins have long been the subject of faith, fascination, and debate. Unlike many other religious artifacts, the black stone is not hidden away in a glass case or kept behind guarded doors. It is there, visible, accessible, though heavily protected during pilgrimage seasons, encased in a silver frame and kissed by the faithful who can reach it. It is not large, perhaps the size of a melon, and has broken into several pieces over time, now held together by the ornate frame. Its surface is dark, almost black, and said to emit a subtle, otherworldly scent. But what is it? And where did it come from? In Islamic tradition, the black stone was sent from heaven. According to Hadith, it was given to the Prophet Abraham, and his son Ismail, as they constructed the Kaaba, the holiest site in Islam. It is said that the stone was once white, radiant and pure, but darkened over time by the sins of humanity. For Muslims, it is not an object of worship, but of remembrance, a symbol of divine presence, and a touchpoint with the sacred history of the Abrahamic tradition. Yet despite its central role in ritual, the stone's material nature remains a mystery. Geologists, historians, and archaeologists have long speculated about its origin. Is it a meteorite, an object that truly came from the heavens, in a literal sense? Some have proposed this, citing its unusual luster, metallic ring when struck, and smooth surface. Could it be a form of glass created by a lightning strike or volcanic activity? Or a type of agate or basalt, polished over centuries of contact? Scientific study is limited. The black stone has never been subject to full geological analysis. Its location, inside the Kaaba, places it in one of the most protected and revered spaces on Earth. For believers, the question of its composition may even feel irrelevant. Its power is not in what it is, but in what it represents. Still, the theories persist. Some accounts from travelers and historians over the centuries describe the stone as warm to the touch, with a texture unlike any known material. Others say it has changed in appearance over time, from bright to dark, from whole to fractured. Was it damaged during times of conflict? Or has it always been fragmentary, a relic carried across ages and empires? There is also the matter of its survival. The Kaaba has been rebuilt multiple times, by the Quraysh tribe before the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and several times afterward due to flooding, fires, and conflict. The black stone, however, has remained, moved, yes, but preserved. During one such rebuilding before Islam, the tribes of Mecca nearly came to blows over who would place the stone in its sacred position. It was the young Muhammad who resolved the dispute, placing the stone on a cloth and inviting the tribal leaders to lift it together. He then guided it into place himself. This moment, peaceful, symbolic, cemented the stone's place not only in the structure of the Kaaba, but in the very spirit of Islam, a symbol of unity. And yet, even within this unity, questions linger. Some fringe theories go further. They suggest the black stone may be a relic from a long-lost civilization, perhaps one that predated recorded history in the Arabian Peninsula. Others speculate it could be connected to celestial events, an ancient marker for astronomical alignments, or a signpost used by ancient star-worshipping cultures long before the rise of monotheism in the region. These ideas are not supported by Islamic tradition, but they speak to the larger human impulse to search for meaning in what endures. There are even tales, largely apocryphal, of those who attempted to steal or damage the stone. In the 10th century, a radical group known as the Karmatians looted Mecca and took the Black Stone, carrying it to their stronghold in eastern Arabia. It was gone for over 20 years before it was returned. Some claim the stone now in Mecca is not the original. Others believe it was broken during that time and reassembled. But once again, history is silent where speculation grows. Could a single object truly carry such weight across so many centuries? Could stone hold memory, not only of human touch, but of something more? In the end, the Black Stone remains both utterly real and profoundly mysterious. It is there, visible to all, touched by millions. Yet what lies at its core, its origin, its composition, its secret history, remains hidden, wrapped in faith and reverence. What if it truly did come from beyond this world, not as a metaphor, but as a fact? What if its darkness does not only reflect the sins of humanity, but the unknowable depths of time? Or what if the Black Stone is something even simpler, a piece of earth that, through devotion, became more than stone? It still rests in the corner of the Kaaba, timeless, unmoved, waiting. And as the pilgrims circle around it, year after year, it continues to ask the same silent question. What do we see when we look into the heart of something sacred? From the ancient stone set in the wall of the Kaaba, a silent witness to centuries of devotion, we now move to a mystery that lifts us from earth into the realm of the heavens. It is a journey spoken of with awe and reverence, woven into the fabric of Islamic belief, not merely as legend, but as a moment where the veil between the physical and the divine was drawn back. This is the Isra and Miraj, the night journey of the Prophet Muhammad. It begins in the stillness of the night, in Mecca. According to Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad was resting near the Kaaba when he was awakened by the angel Gabriel, who presented him with a mysterious steed called Al-Burak. Described as dazzling white, swift as lightning, and larger than a mule but smaller than a horse, this celestial creature would carry the Prophet on the first leg of an extraordinary journey. The Isra, or night journey, took him from Mecca to the farthest mosque, Al-Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. Today, that mosque is believed to be located on the Temple Mount, near the Golden Dome of the Rock. It is one of the holiest places in Islam. Standing on that plateau, surrounded by the ancient stones of prophets long past, one can almost feel the quiet echo of something beyond time. According to tradition, upon arriving in Jerusalem, Muhammad led a congregation of earlier prophets in prayer, among them Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. It was a moment of unity across ages, a symbol of continuity rather than division. But this was only the beginning. From that sacred place, the journey turned upward. This was the Miraj, the Ascension. Accompanied once more by Gabriel, the prophet is said to have ascended through the 7 heavens, encountering prophets and angelic hosts along the way. In the first heaven, he met Adam. In the second, John the Baptist and Jesus. In the third, Joseph. Then Idris. Then Aaron. Then Moses. And finally, in the 7th heaven, Abraham. Each encounter was marked by peace and recognition. Each step, a transition from the earthly to the divine. Beyond the 7th heaven, the prophet was brought to Sidrat al-Muntaha, the lote tree of the utmost boundary. In Islamic cosmology, this is the outermost edge of creation, where knowledge and reality stop, and only God remains. There, Muhammad is said to have received directly from God the commandment of daily prayer, initially 50, later reduced to 5, after conversations with Moses during the return descent. This event, sacred and central, is not merely a story of physical travel. It is understood by many scholars and theologians as a multi-dimensional experience, part spiritual, part miraculous, unfolding beyond the limits of human perception. The Quran itself references the journey briefly in Surah Al-Isra. Glory be to him who took his servant by night from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque, whose surroundings we have blessed. The details are expanded upon in Hadith literature, preserved through centuries of transmission. But how are we to understand it? For believers, the journey is a miracle, one that affirms the Prophet's role, reveals the unseen structure of the cosmos, and brings divine guidance into human life. It is commemorated annually on the 27th night of Rajab, marked by reflection, prayer, and awe. For those looking through a historical or analytical lens, the night journey poses questions that defy empirical logic. Was it bodily? Was it visionary? Islamic scholars across generations have discussed both views with deep respect. Some hold that the journey occurred in spirit, others in both body and spirit. The traditions leave room for mystery. And then, of course, there are the symbols, the radiant steed, the ascending heavens, the dialogues between prophets. Could these be metaphors for deeper truths? Or are they exactly what they are described to be? Glimpses into realities far beyond our own. The location of Al-Aqsa Mosque itself has become a point of reflection. Though the physical mosque we see today was constructed decades after the Prophet's time, the sanctity of the site predates Islam, echoing with centuries of monotheistic tradition. The very idea that the Prophet's journey passed through Jerusalem ties Islam to the heart of Abrahamic history, a thread linking three faiths through one sacred geography. But perhaps one of the most mysterious aspects of the Miraj is what remains unsaid. What truly lies beyond the Lote tree? What was seen there that cannot be described? The Prophet himself spoke little of that highest encounter, only that it was beyond words, beyond understanding. Was it a vision of the divine, a union of soul and creator, or something for which no language exists? We are left with images, fragments, silences. What does it mean for a human being to ascend through the heavens? What does it mean for space and time to dissolve under the weight of sacred experience? And perhaps most importantly, what is the message for those who remain here, on Earth, trying to understand a journey that moved beyond the stars? The Isra and Miraj is not just a mystery of the past. It is a mirror, reflecting the possibility of closeness to the divine. A reminder that even from the dust of the earth, the sky is never too far. And as the night deepens, as the faithful turn toward the heavens in prayer, one question continues to echo, softly and eternally. What else lies beyond the veil, waiting to be revealed? As the night journey ends, its luminous path arcing between earth and heaven, we return to something grounded, yet no less mysterious. A text, a revelation. Words spoken in the stillness of night and the tumult of history. Words recited, memorized, preserved, not across years, but across centuries, and not by a single hand or voice, but by millions. This is the Quran, not merely a book, but a phenomenon. From the calligraphy-laced walls of Cairo's Al-Azhar Mosque to the quiet recitations echoing at dawn in remote mountain villages, the Quran is ever present. Its sound, rhythm, and meaning form the heartbeat of Islamic life. But beyond its influence lies a question that has intrigued believers, historians, and scholars alike. How has the Quran remained unchanged since the 7th century? How has it endured, letter for letter, word for word, through revolutions, empires, conquests, and time? The Quran, according to Islamic belief, was revealed over a span of 23 years to the Prophet Muhammad by the angel Gabriel, beginning in the year 610 AD. It was recited orally, memorized and transmitted by his companions. The Prophet himself was ummi, unlettered, yet the Quran was filled with linguistic complexity and depth, rich in metaphor, law, history, and poetry. But how does a recited text survive intact through generations without alteration? In the early years, many companions of the Prophet memorized the entire Quran, becoming hufaz, guardians of the text. Oral preservation was not a casual practice, but a structured tradition. Verses were repeated daily, taught word for word, with precise pronunciation and rhythm. This oral transmission was considered not only a way to preserve the text, but the only acceptable method to truly embody its sound and meaning. To this day, children across the Islamic world learn to recite it from memory, just as it was first passed down. Yet memory alone is not the whole story. Fragments of the Quran were also written during the Prophet's lifetime, on parchment, leather, bone, and palm leaves. After his death in 632 AD, concerns grew as some of the Hufaz were martyred in battle. The Caliph Abu Bakr, urged by Umar ibn al-Khattab, ordered the compilation of these verses into a single manuscript. This monumental task was given to Zayd ibn Thabit, the Prophet's former scribe. He cross-verified the verses with memorized recitations and written fragments to ensure perfect accuracy. That manuscript, known as the Mushaf, was preserved and guarded. Later, during the Caliphate of Uthman ibn Affan, as Islam spread rapidly across new regions and dialects began to affect pronunciation, Uthman commissioned several standardized copies of the Quran and sent them to key cities: Mecca, Medina, Kufa, Basra, Damascus. He also ordered all unofficial versions to be removed to prevent confusion. This act, though administrative in nature, would have long-lasting effects. It cemented the unity of the Quran in a single, universally accepted form. And remarkably, that form endures. To this day, every Quran recited or printed in the Arabic language matches this Uthmanic text. Whether read in Jakarta, Istanbul, Lagos, or London, the words remain the same. Not a word altered, not a verse missing. Muslims believe this is a fulfillment of the divine promise preserved in the Quran itself. Indeed, it is we who sent down the reminder, and indeed, we will be its guardian. But even outside of theology, the preservation of the Quran is something few deny. Non-Muslim historians and textual scholars have studied early Quranic manuscripts with fascination. Among the most significant discoveries is the Birmingham manuscript, housed in the University of Birmingham, carbon dated to between 568 and 645 AD, placing it potentially within the Prophet's own lifetime. The text on its pages matches exactly with today's Quran. Likewise, the top-copy manuscript in Istanbul, the Samarkand Codex, and the Sana'a manuscript in Yemen all reflect the same core text, with only minor orthographic differences, variations in spelling or script style, not in content. How is it that a text, transmitted primarily through the human voice, could remain so exact? One answer lies in the unique system of recitation known as tajweed. The rules of tajweed govern pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, and articulation, preserving not just the meaning of the Quran, but its sound. It is not enough to read the words. One must recite them as they were heard. There are even multiple canonical modes of recitation, known as the Qira'at, each tracing its chain of transmission back to the Prophet himself, preserved in detail and verified generation after generation. And so, the Quran lives not only in books, but in breath, in voice, in memory. Of course, skeptics ask questions. Was every early manuscript destroyed? How do we know oral transmission didn't introduce changes over time? These are fair academic inquiries, yet the evidence, even outside of religious tradition, suggests extraordinary consistency. In a world where most ancient texts exist only in fragmented copies with significant discrepancies, the Quran's preservation stands apart. Is it the result of a uniquely rigorous memorization culture? A remarkable convergence of oral and written traditions? Or something more, something that lies beyond human explanation? The preservation of the Quran invites us to reconsider the relationship between memory, language, and sacredness. How could a text so expansive, so complex, be passed down without corruption in a world without printing presses, without digital backups? And what does it mean that a book from the 7th century still pulses through the hearts of millions, recited word for word in early morning darkness, in whispered devotion, in grand communal prayer? Perhaps the Quran is more than a preserved text. Perhaps it is a living one. And perhaps that is the real mystery, not just how it survived, but how it continues to speak, in every generation, with a voice that never fades. From the preservation of sacred words, spoken and remembered with remarkable precision, we turn now to words that speak not of the past, but of the future. Words that hint at a time when the veil between the world we know and the world that awaits will fall away. A time of upheaval, signs, and final reckonings. Within the Hadith, the recorded sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, there lies a body of tradition, both revered and mysterious. The Alamat al-Sa'a, the signs of the hour. Across deserts and cities, in the pages of ancient manuscripts and the hearts of believers, these signs echo like warnings from another time. Some are small and subtle, others are immense, cosmic, almost apocalyptic, and together they form a vision of the world's final chapter unlike any other. But how do we make sense of these prophecies, and are they unfolding before our eyes? Others contains detailed references to events that will precede the Day of Judgment. These signs are traditionally divided into two categories: minor signs, which are numerous and often gradual, and major signs, which are extraordinary and unmistakable. The minor signs describe a world slowly unraveling from within. Among them are the rise of widespread immorality, the normalization of dishonesty, leaders who betray their trust, buildings that pierce the sky, the proliferation of music and musical instruments, the increase of wealth and inequality, the spread of literacy, yet an absence of understanding. Some of these signs seem vague, poetic. Others feel hauntingly familiar in a modern world of endless skyscrapers, instant communication, and dizzying change. Did the prophet describe trends that would emerge over centuries? Or are these timeless human patterns we're only now noticing more clearly? Then come the major signs, events that, according to tradition, will mark the nearness of the final hour like thunder before a storm. Among the most well-known is the appearance of the Dajjal, a false messiah described as a great deceiver, blind in one eye, able to perform wonders and sway masses. His emergence will shake the world, drawing people toward illusion and temptation. In contrast, the return of Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus, son of Mary, is foretold. He will descend near a white minaret in Damascus, clad in robes, with hands resting on the wings of angels. His mission: to restore justice, defeat the Dajjal, and break the cross, not as a rejection of Jesus himself, but as a correction of distortions made over time. This moment, powerful, peaceful, and transcendent, forms a bridge between belief systems and ages. Other signs are deeply symbolic and cosmic in scale. The sun rising from the west instead of the east. A beast emerging from the earth, speaking to humanity. A smoke covering the sky. 3 major landslides, one in the east, one in the west, and one in the Arabian Peninsula. The fire that will drive people to their final gathering. There is also mention of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog, tribes of immense power, sealed behind a barrier built by Dhul-Qarnayn, a mysterious ancient figure. When they are unleashed, they will swarm across the earth, spreading chaos. Are these literal people, symbolic forces, or something else entirely? Over the centuries, scholars have debated how to understand these signs. Are they metaphors or events to come? Are they to be interpreted literally or understood through the lens of unfolding history? The Hadith do not always offer timelines or specifics. Some traditions describe events in vivid detail, while others are brief and enigmatic, open to many layers of meaning. And yet, certain parallels have caused many to pause. In our time, we see nations collapsing from within, wealth accumulating in fewer hands, natural disasters growing in frequency and scale, technology advancing faster than moral guidance, and even the idea of global deception, of truth being distorted until the lines blur. Are these simply the cycles of history? Or have we entered an age when the signs are no longer distant? Still, Islamic tradition cautions against obsession. The purpose of the signs, according to scholars, is not to create fear or speculation, but awareness. They are reminders that this world is temporary, that justice will ultimately prevail, and that truth, no matter how buried, will be revealed. It's also important to note that these signs, though dramatic, are not presented as hopeless. The world, even at its most chaotic, remains under divine will. The return of Isa, the unity that follows, the final restoration of peace, all are described as realities that will come before the final judgment. The signs are not just warnings, they are stages in a larger, divinely guided unfolding. Still, the mystery remains. Why were these specific images chosen? What might it mean symbolically for the sun to rise from the west? What is the nature of the beast, the smoke, the sealed tribes, and perhaps most haunting of all, if the signs are true, where are we on the timeline? The Hadith do not give dates, they do not map out a calendar. Instead, they whisper through time, offering glimpses, like candlelight flickering against a dark wall, enough to see the path ahead, but not the whole of it. As the Prophet once said, the hour will not come until, followed by signs meant to awaken, not alarm. And so, as we watch the world shift and change, as we read the ancient words and try to place ourselves within them, we're left with a quiet, unsettling question. Are the signs still waiting? Or are they already here, unfolding quietly beneath our feet, one by one? As the last of the end-time signs gathers on the horizon, portents of upheaval, cosmic shifts, and the unraveling of the known world, there emerges one final figure cloaked in prophecy and mystery. Neither angel nor prophet, neither king nor myth, he is known simply as Al-Mahdi, the Guided One. A man whose coming, according to Islamic tradition, will mark the beginning of the world's final reckoning and the long-awaited restoration of justice. But who is the Mahdi, and where has he gone? Across centuries and cultures, from desert minarets to whispered gatherings in mountain caves, the belief in the Mahdi's return has lived on, not as distant folklore, but as a promise. In both Sunni and Shia traditions, the Mahdi is seen as a divinely guided leader who will rise in a time of global turmoil, a time when the earth is filled with injustice and oppression, and when hope seems nearly extinguished. His name, it is said, will mirror that of the Prophet Muhammad. His lineage will trace back to the Prophet's family, and his mission will be one not of destruction, but of correction, bringing balance to a fractured world. He will unite the believers. He will establish true justice. And alongside the Prophet Isa, Jesus, who will return to earth, they will defeat the forces of falsehood, including the Dajjal, the great deceiver. But beyond these signs, the details blur. Hadiths about the Mahdi vary. Some describe his appearance in Mecca during the pilgrimage season. Others say he will be reluctant to lead, found by the people, and accepted only after much insistence. Some narrations speak of a heavenly voice announcing his arrival. Others mention armies marching from the east, carrying black banners in his name. For many, these are not distant predictions, they are signs to be watched for. Markers of a world on the edge, a signal that the time of transformation is near. And yet, the Mahdi has never been seen. Or, has he? In Shia Islam, particularly within the Twelver tradition, the mystery takes on a deeper dimension. The Mahdi is not only a future figure, he is also a hidden one. According to Shia belief, the 12th Imam, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi, was born in the 9th century AD and went into occultation, hidden by divine will from the eyes of the world. He is not dead, they believe, but living in concealment, waiting for the time when he will re-emerge. This Kaaba, or occultation, has lasted for over 1,000 years. In that time, scholars, mystics, and seekers have searched for signs of his presence, believing that he communicates through subtle channels, through dreams, visions, or the actions of righteous scholars who unknowingly prepare his path. Skeptics, even within the Islamic world, have asked hard questions. How can one man live for so many centuries? How does concealment operate within history and nature? Yet for believers, these questions miss the point. The Mahdi's hiddenness is not about biology. It is about divine mystery. Like the unseen wind or the veiled night, his presence is not always visible, but deeply felt. Some accounts describe moments where individuals, scholars, ascetics, ordinary people, have encountered a stranger whose wisdom and insight seemed beyond the earthly. A traveler who appeared, offered guidance, and vanished. Were these men impostors, or glimpses of the Mahdi in disguise? In times of chaos, new claimants have arisen, men who declared themselves to be the Mahdi, often with tragic or violent consequences. History remembers them. But the traditions warn, the true Mahdi will not come seeking power or conquest. He will be recognized not through claims, but through deeds. His justice will be unmistakable, his mission unifying. What kind of world must exist for the Mahdi to emerge? A world, it is said, where corruption has become the norm, where truth is ridiculed and falsehood elevated, where division has broken the fabric of society, where people yearn not for wealth or control, but for peace, fairness, and meaning. A world that has, perhaps, already begun to look familiar. And still, silence. No great appearance, no gathering in Mecca, no divine announcement heard across the world. But then again, perhaps that is the nature of his story. What if the Mahdi's return is not simply an event to be witnessed, but a process already unfolding? What if his coming is not only a prophecy about the future, but an invitation to prepare in the present? The Hadith tell us that he will not rise from palaces or the powerful, but from the ordinary. That his followers will not be armies of conquest, but people of character, those who resist injustice with dignity, who speak truth with humility, who keep faith alive in a time of great forgetting. And what if, even now, he walks among the crowds of the world, unseen, waiting not for permission to rise, but for the hearts of humanity to be ready? The Mahdi's return remains one of the most profound and enduring mysteries in the Islamic tradition, a figure at the edge of time, a promise whispered through generations. Is he still hidden? Is he already here? Or is the world itself, its choices, its hopes, its turning points, part of the story we've yet to fully understand? In the end, the Mahdi remains a mystery, not only of when, but why. A question asked in the silence before the storm. A name carried in the prayers of the forgotten. A light waiting, perhaps, just beyond the veil of this world. As we emerge from the echoes of prophecy and return once more to the ancient world, we find ourselves in the inner sanctum of a forgotten temple, somewhere in the wilderness of history. Here, behind the veil of ritual and fire, we encounter two objects mentioned rarely, but with reverence: mysterious, sacred, silent, known simply as the Urim and Thummim. Their names appear like a riddle whispered across time, found in the Hebrew Bible, glimpsed in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Samuel. They are associated with the high priest of ancient Israel, worn within or behind the breastplate of judgment, called the Hoshin, a sacred ornament set with 12 precious stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And behind that breastplate, held perhaps in a hidden pouch, were the Urim and Thummim. But what were they? Scripture offers few details. The terms are often left untranslated, Urim and Thummim, simply rendered as is, as if their mystery defies interpretation. Some say the names derive from roots meaning lights and perfections, suggesting clarity, truth, or revelation. Others translate them more symbolically, illumination and completion. But beyond the names, we are left with fragments. According to tradition, the high priest would use the Urim and Thummim to seek divine guidance, especially in matters of grave national importance: whether to go to war, whether to appoint a leader, whether to act or wait. They were not tools of superstition, but instruments of divine consultation. But how did they work? This is where the mystery deepens. Some scholars believe they were physical objects, perhaps stones or lots, that were cast like dice to reveal a yes or no answer, much like other ancient Near Eastern divinatory practices. Others suggest they were glowing stones that would illuminate to convey answers, bright for yes, dim for no. A few sources hint that they didn't operate mechanically at all, but rather as a kind of conduit for divine inspiration. That when worn by a truly righteous priest, the answers came not through motion or light, but through inner certainty. In all these theories, one thing is clear: the Urim and Thummim were not ordinary items. They were sacred instruments tied to purity, consecration, and direct access to divine will. And when the age of prophecy began to fade, so did they. By the time of the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BC, references to the Urim and Thummim disappear. When exiles returned to Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple, the sacred breastplate was restored, but the Urim and Thummim were no longer present. Some Jewish texts, like the Talmud, acknowledge their loss. Others suggest they were hidden, perhaps buried beneath the ruins of the temple, or taken into heaven, waiting for a future time when prophecy would return. Were they ever rediscovered? That question remains open. Over the centuries, legends emerged. Some claimed that secret sects retained knowledge of their use. Others pointed to cryptic descriptions in ancient manuscripts, suggesting that similar tools of revelation existed in Mesopotamia and Egypt, and that the Urim and Thummim were part of a broader tradition now lost. Their absence became part of their power, a sacred silence in the history of divine communication. In more recent centuries, the mystery took on new dimensions. In the 19th century, members of the Latter-day Saint movement claimed that a restored version of the Urim and Thummim was used to translate the Book of Mormon, described as clear stones set in silver bows, used by the prophet Joseph Smith to receive divine revelation. These claims, while debated outside the faith, revived interest in the original biblical mystery, sparking questions about how such instruments might transcend time and tradition. Could the Urim and Thummim be something more than physical tools? Some modern scholars and mystics have proposed esoteric interpretations, that they represented dual forces, light and truth, intuition and clarity, that they were not meant to give simple answers, but to guide the seeker into communion with divine wisdom. Others wonder whether they symbolized an ancient method of attunement, a way for the high priest to access spiritual states through sacred ritual, clothing, and place. And still, the mystery holds. The Urim and Thummim are never described in full detail. Their shape, their size, their color, all unknown. Their disappearance, unmarked. Their legacy, preserved only in name and myth. Why were they mentioned at all if their purpose would fade so quickly from recorded history? Were they real? Were they metaphor? Were they a form of lost technology, or simply a spiritual concept dressed in the language of sacred objects? And if they once served as a direct link between heaven and earth, might they still exist somewhere, waiting? Perhaps in a hidden chamber beneath ancient stone, perhaps in a text not yet unearthed, or perhaps in a realm not measured by space or time at all. The Urim and Thummim remain one of the quietest yet most enduring enigmas of ancient faith, objects at the edge of revelation, instruments of light and truth. And in a world where certainty is elusive, they continue to whisper from the shadows of the past. What if answers were once given, not in voices, but in light? And what if, just once, humanity held in its hands a way to ask the divine, and truly hear the reply? As the ancient echoes of sacred objects fade, stones of judgment lost to time, we shift our gaze toward a different kind of disappearance. Not of an artifact, but of a people. A disappearance so vast, so enduring, that it continues to stir questions across continents and centuries. It is the mystery of a vanished multitude, the lost 10 tribes of Israel. The story begins nearly 3,000 years ago, in a land once divided. After the death of King Solomon, the United Kingdom of Israel split in two. The southern kingdom of Judah, with Jerusalem as its center, and the northern kingdom of Israel, made up of 10 tribes: Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, and Manasseh. These were tribes descended from the 12 sons of Jacob, each with its territory, identity, and lineage. Then came the fall. In 722 BC, the powerful Assyrian Empire swept down upon the northern kingdom. Samaria fell, cities burned, populations were taken, displaced, deported, scattered. The Assyrians, known for their brutal policies of forced resettlement, removed tens of thousands of Israelites from their homeland and resettled them in distant lands across their empire, from the banks of the Tigris to the mountains of Media. And then, silence. The biblical narrative shifts. The prophets speak of their absence, of longing, of future restoration. But the historical record grows quiet. The 10 tribes, once a vibrant part of the ancient Israelite nation, seem to vanish from the pages of history. No great return is recorded. No definitive trace remains. Where did they go? It is one of the oldest and most enduring enigmas in religious and historical scholarship. Over the centuries, countless theories have emerged, some grounded in anthropology, others in faith, myth, and longing. Each suggests a possibility. Each opens a door. Some scholars believe the exiled Israelites were absorbed into local populations, their identity gradually fading into the cultures of Mesopotamia and Persia. Over generations, names changed, languages shifted, memory blurred. In this view, the tribes were not so much lost as forgotten, dissolved into history's currents, like ink in water. But others argue that they survived, hidden, waiting, or even unknowingly preserving parts of their heritage in distant lands. From Ethiopia to Kashmir, from Japan to the American Southwest, people groups have, at times, claimed descent from the lost tribes, or been identified as possible descendants by outside observers. The Beta Israel of Ethiopia, long practicing a form of ancient Judaism, were recognized in modern times by the State of Israel as a remnant of the tribe of Dan. Their customs, prayers, and isolation sparked centuries of curiosity before they were brought to Israel in daring airlifts during the 1980s and 1990s. In the highlands of Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Pashtun tribes, particularly among the Yusufzai, or sons of Joseph, have long maintained oral traditions linking them to the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Their names, customs, and even ancient legal codes have been compared to biblical patterns. In northeastern India, the Bnei Menashe, children of Manasseh, claim descent from the same tribe. Their ancestors, they say, wandered across Asia after the exile, preserving fragments of Israelite memory before eventually settling along the India-Myanmar border. In recent decades, genetic studies, rabbinical inquiries, and personal testimonies have brought some of them to modern Israel. Then, there are more speculative theories. Medieval European legends once claimed that the 10 tribes lived behind a mystical river called the Sambation, which, according to lore, raged 6 days a week but rested on the Sabbath, making it impossible for observant Jews to cross. Others believed the tribes lived in a hidden kingdom, cut off from the rest of the world by divine design, until a time of redemption. In Japan, cultural similarities and ancient myths have led some researchers to draw tenuous connections between early Japanese religious practices and Israelite rites, though these claims remain controversial and highly debated. Some Native American tribes, particularly during early European colonization, were theorized by missionaries to be descended from the lost tribes, based on observed customs and physical similarities. While these theories have largely been dismissed by modern anthropology, they highlight the enduring reach of the mystery and the desire to bridge the gap between past and present. What is it about the lost tribes that continues to fascinate? Perhaps it is the sense of incompletion, the idea that a part of something sacred has been scattered but not erased, that somewhere, across the deserts or mountains or jungles, the remnants of an ancient covenant still walk, waiting to be called back. In the prophetic books, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, there are visions of return, of the tribes reuniting, of a final gathering, not only of Judah, but of all of Israel. These are not only theological hopes, they are rooted in the narrative of restoration, a cycle of loss, exile, and homecoming. And yet, we still do not know. Were the 10 tribes truly lost, or simply renamed? Were they scattered beyond recognition, or preserved in ways we've yet to understand? Could fragments of their memory lie in forgotten manuscripts, buried cities, or unbroken family traditions that whisper quietly through generations? Or is their story not just about people, but about identity, about how faith and heritage endure even when history loses track? The lost tribes remain an open question, a puzzle without edges, not erased, but hidden, not myth, but mystery. And somewhere, perhaps, the answer still waits, in a song, a surname, a prayer in an unfamiliar tongue, waiting to be recognized, waiting to return. From the forgotten paths of the 10 tribes, scattered across history like fragments of a broken mirror, we now turn to a mountain, a place of fire and cloud, a summit wrapped in thunder and silence. It is one of the most sacred and mysterious locations in the religious memory of humanity, Mount Sinai. It is said that here, in the wilderness, the heavens touch the earth. That atop this mountain, cloaked in smoke and trembling with divine presence, Moses received the 10 Commandments, etched in stone by the very hand of God. The mountain, according to Scripture, was so holy that even touching its base was forbidden. The people below heard the voice like rolling thunder, saw lightning pierce the sky, and trembled as Moses climbed alone into the unknown. But more than 3,000 years later, one question still lingers. Where is Mount Sinai? The traditional answer points to Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, where a towering peak known as Jebel Musa, the Mountain of Moses, rises from the desert. At its base lies St. Catherine's Monastery, a fortress of stone built in the 6th century AD, still inhabited by Eastern Orthodox monks. Pilgrims have walked these paths for centuries, ascending before dawn to catch the sunrise over the peaks, retracing steps believed to echo Moses' own. And yet, there is no archaeological evidence linking Jebel Musa directly to the biblical events of Exodus. No tablets, no altars, no trace of the vast encampments described in Scripture. The mountain's identification with Sinai comes from tradition, early Christian pilgrims, local Bedouins, and imperial patrons who anchored faith in this geography. But what if the true Mount Sinai lies elsewhere? Over the past century, a growing chorus of scholars, explorers, and independent researchers have questioned the traditional location. Some argue that if the Exodus began in Egypt and moved eastward toward Midian, where Moses first encountered the burning bush, then the mountain might logically be found not in the Sinai Peninsula at all, but across the Gulf of Kaaba, in modern-day Saudi Arabia. Here, in a remote and mountainous region known as Jebel al-Lawz, stands a peak shrouded in mystery. The summit appears scorched, blackened as if burned by intense heat. Locals call it the Mountain of Moses, and access is restricted. Some explorers who managed to enter the area have claimed to find intriguing features: large boulders split down the middle, ancient altars with animal engravings, and the remains of stone circles and campsites. Could this be the true Mount Sinai? The Bible describes the Israelites encamping near the mountain for nearly a year. It mentions specific features: a plain large enough for thousands, a stream of water, and the infamous golden calf episode, where Moses descends to find his people worshipping an idol near the base of the mountain. Some claim these features align more closely with the terrain around Jebel al-Lawz than with the Sinai Peninsula. Yet the evidence remains circumstantial. Saudi authorities have not sanctioned full archaeological digs in the area. Much of the reporting comes from independent adventurers, not academic teams. Photographs and satellite images are compelling, but inconclusive. Without systematic excavation, the case remains speculative, provocative, but not proven. Other theories place Mount Sinai in locations as far-flung as Petra in Jordan, the Negev Desert, or even parts of northwestern Arabia near ancient Midianite settlements. Each theory draws from scripture, topography, and sometimes even ancient trade routes. But the mountain remains elusive, hidden behind shifting sand, tradition, and time. Could it be that the mountain was never meant to be found? Some religious scholars propose that Sinai's exact location is deliberately obscured, that its holiness was not meant to be tied forever to a single place, but to an event, a moment in history, a covenant beyond geography. In this view, the mountain is remembered not for where it stood, but for what it meant: the giving of divine law, the forging of identity, the trembling awe of contact with the eternal. Others suggest that the mountain's hiddenness is a reflection of deeper mystery, that the voice from the cloud and the flame was never about spectacle, but about transformation. That Sinai exists, not just in desert stone, but wherever human beings seek the divine with trembling hands. Still, the question endures. What if the true Mount Sinai is out there, its summit forgotten, its secrets buried beneath centuries of dust? What if we've stood in its shadow and not known? What might still lie beneath those blackened rocks, those wind-swept ridges? Could the tablets have been buried or hidden? Could inscriptions remain, waiting to be deciphered? Or has the mountain, like so many sacred things, slipped just beyond reach, visible only to those who still dare to search, not just across maps, but within? The mystery of Mount Sinai is not merely a question of stones and peaks. It is a question of memory, of revelation, of how a people once stood at the edge of the world, and heard a voice not their own. And so the mountain waits, whether in Egypt, Arabia, or in the silence between belief and proof. And the world, still wondering, asks, where did the sky once touch the earth? And who will find the place where God once spoke in fire? From the smoldering summit of Sinai, where the voice of the divine is said to have echoed through fire and cloud, we follow the footsteps of a people into the wilderness. They do not carry stone and gold merely as treasures, but as memory, covenant, presence. And at the center of it all was a structure unlike any other, portable, sacred, and shrouded in layered curtains and ritual. This was the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, the dwelling place of God on earth. It was more than a tent, more than a mobile sanctuary. According to the book of Exodus, its design was given to Moses on Mount Sinai in exquisite detail. Every measurement, every material, dictated by divine instruction. Acacia wood, gold overlays, embroidered linen in blue and scarlet thread. It housed the Ark of the Covenant, the lampstand, the altar of incense, and the table for the bread of presence. And yet, today, it is gone. No one knows where the tabernacle went. No remnant survives, no ruins, no foundation. For something so meticulously constructed, so central to the faith and identity of early Israel, its disappearance is stunning. The silence in the archaeological record is profound. And so, like the ark it once sheltered, the tabernacle becomes not only a relic of Scripture, but a mystery of history. What happened to it? For centuries, the tabernacle served as the spiritual heart of the Israelites. It moved with them through the wilderness. It stood at the center of their encampments as they crossed the desert and fought for the promised land. It was established at Shiloh, in the hill country of Ephraim, and remained there for over 3 centuries, according to the book of Joshua and later accounts in Judges and Samuel. But then, something shifted. During the time of the prophet Samuel, the ark was taken into battle against the Philistines and captured. Though eventually returned, it was no longer housed in the tabernacle. Meanwhile, Shiloh was destroyed, likely by the Philistines as well. The Bible does not describe the tabernacle's fate in detail after this event. It simply fades from the narrative, like a curtain quietly drawn shut. Later texts mention that the tabernacle, or elements of it, were moved to Nob and then to Gibeon. Priests continued to serve, sacrifices continued to be made, but the centrality of the tabernacle had diminished. By the time Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem, nearly 500 years after the Exodus, the tabernacle was no longer needed. Its role had passed. But what became of its materials, its sacred architecture? Could the golden clasps, the bronze bases, the fine woven veils have been dismantled, reused, hidden? Were its holy components integrated into the temple, as some rabbis have speculated, or stored in secret beneath Jerusalem's foundations? No definitive answer has ever been found. Over the centuries, a number of theories have emerged, some grounded in archaeology, others in legend. Some believe the remains of the tabernacle lie buried beneath ancient Shiloh, where excavations have uncovered evidence of ritual worship dating back to the correct period. Large flat platforms have been found, possibly the base of a sacred structure. Pottery shards match the time frame, but no definitive proof has emerged. No beams, no coverings, no inscriptions. Others suggest the tabernacle was taken to Jerusalem after David moved the ark there, awaiting the construction of the temple. Yet there is no trace of it in the accounts of Solomon's dedication. It vanishes beneath the grandeur of stone and cedar. Still others point to Ethiopia. Some traditions, particularly within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, claim that both the ark and its dwelling place were brought south by descendants of the Israelite priesthood, through Egypt and up the Nile. Could the tabernacle, or a version of it, have been reconstructed in Aksum? Pilgrims in Ethiopia still speak of sacred chambers none may enter. Monks guard what they claim is the Ark, housed in a chapel. If true, could elements of the tabernacle have survived alongside it? And then there are more symbolic theories. Some scholars believe that the tabernacle was never meant to be a permanent structure. Its disappearance was part of a larger transition, from the nomadic spirituality of the desert to the centralized worship of the temple. In this view, the tabernacle's loss is not a historical problem, but a theological evolution, a fading tent giving way to stone and permanence. But still, there is an unease. How could something so holy, so central to Israelite worship, crafted to divine specification, simply vanish? If the Ark was hidden, protected from invading empires, would the same not be done for the tabernacle? And if so, where? Could it be folded and buried, sealed in a chamber beneath ancient Jerusalem, or hidden in one of the many caves dotting the Judean hills? Could it lie beneath centuries of ruins, waiting to be rediscovered? Or was it dismantled not in secrecy, but in ceremony, its parts scattered, its purpose fulfilled, like the fading of a sacred era? Today, nothing like the tabernacle exists. No surviving fragments, no certain replicas, only descriptions in the Torah, painstaking and precise, only echoes in stone and in memory. And so the question remains, haunting and unresolved. What became of the tent that once held the presence of the divine? Is it lost forever, scattered to dust, or waiting still, hidden beyond sight, a symbol of a time when heaven once dwelled among fabric and fire? As the last embroidered veils of the tabernacle fall away into memory, we shift now from the visible to the hidden, from sacred architecture to sacred utterance. Not a place, but a name. A name not spoken aloud, yet said to hold the very essence of divine power. A name whispered in the shadows of ancient texts, encoded in scripture, sought by mystics across centuries. It is called the Shem HaMephorash, the explicit name. In Jewish mystical tradition, it is the most sacred formulation of the divine name, a 72-letter name of God, drawn not from imagination, but from the Hebrew Bible itself. Unlike the 4-letter tetragrammaton, which is known and revered but never pronounced, the Shem HaMephorash is said to be hidden, layered beneath the surface of sacred verses, waiting to be revealed only to the initiated. But what is this name, really? Where does it come from? And why has it remained so deeply shrouded in secrecy? The roots of the Shem HaMephorash trace back to the book of Exodus. In chapter 14, verses 19 through 21, as the Israelites stand trapped between the sea and Pharaoh's army, a miracle unfolds. These 3 verses, each containing exactly 72 Hebrew letters, describe the moment the Red Sea parts, where divine intervention pierces the natural world. According to Kabbalistic tradition, when these verses are arranged in a particular manner, forward, then backward, then forward again, and their letters aligned, they form 72 triplets, 72 combinations of 3 Hebrew letters, each said to represent one of the 72 aspects of divine action, power, and presence. Together, they constitute the Shem HaMephorash, a name too holy for speech, too potent for casual knowledge. Mystics believe that these names were not arbitrary syllables, but keys, each unlocking a specific attribute of the divine. One triplet might govern healing, another protection, another understanding. To know the full 72-letter name was to access a hidden map of the cosmos, a latticework of divine will woven into the fabric of creation. But only a few, it is said, were ever entrusted with it. Ancient rabbinic traditions suggest that the high priest of the temple in Jerusalem knew the explicit name. On Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, he would utter it in the innermost chamber of the temple, the Holy of Holies. When he did, Legend holds, the name would rise into the air like smoke, radiating through all levels of being. And those who heard it, if their hearts were not pure, would fall silent forever. Later traditions hint that knowledge of the name was lost after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. Others claim it was not lost, but hidden, encoded in texts, passed in whispers from teacher to student, written in the margins of forbidden books, protected by layers of metaphor and symbol. Medieval Kabbalists such as Isaac Luria and Moses de Leon would explore the structure and significance of the name, linking the 72 triplets to angelic hierarchies, astrological forces, and the inner architecture of the soul. In their writings, the Shem HaMephorash is not a static name. It is a dynamic formula, alive with spiritual resonance. But where does the mystery begin, and where does it end? In later centuries, European occultists, particularly within Hermetic and esoteric Christian circles, discovered the concept of the 72 names and integrated it into magical grimoires. The names became tools of invocation, engraved in amulets, whispered in rituals. Some believed the names could summon angels. Others warned they could tear open the veil between worlds. But traditional Jewish mysticism always maintained a different posture. The name was not a trick, not a spell. It was sacred. To approach it was to stand on holy ground. So, how do we separate fact from speculation? Modern scholars recognize that the method of deriving the 72 triplets from Exodus 14 is real, a legitimate linguistic and numerological technique grounded in the Hebrew text. The arrangement is methodical, not arbitrary. But what meaning is truly embedded in the result? Some argue that the triplets are poetic. Others see in them a numerical code. Still others, mystics and mathematicians alike, believe they form the structure of a spiritual language, meant to reflect the unfolding of divine will across time. And yet, no one claims to know exactly how the name works, or what it means to use it. Could it be that the Shem HaMephorash is not a name at all, but a mirror, a map of how the human soul approaches the unknowable, a riddle meant to humble, not to solve? Or perhaps the true name is not in letters, but in silence, in the space between the words of Exodus, in the moment the sea parted, not because of syllables spoken, but because of hearts aligned. Today, the 72 names of God are still recited in mystical meditations, studied in secret, feared in some circles, venerated in others. The letters remain. The triplets endure. But the full meaning of the Shem HaMephorash lies just beyond reach, inviting reflection, not resolution. And so we are left with the question, is the explicit name hidden in plain sight? Is it a code waiting to be broken? Or is it a door that opens not with knowledge, but with reverence? Perhaps the Shem HaMephorash is not a key to power, but to presence, a whisper of the infinite, stitched into the very language of the divine. From the veiled power of sacred syllables to the shimmering edge of the Arabian Sea, our journey moves now from text to terrain, from a hidden name to a city whispered about in scripture, long thought to be legend. A city of golden towers and vast palaces, said to have been built by divine hands and swallowed by the sea. This is Dwarka, the fabled city of Krishna. According to ancient Hindu texts like the Mahabharata, the Bhagavata Purana, and the Harivamsa, Dwarka was no ordinary settlement. It was a city built for a god, planned, constructed, and governed by Lord Krishna, the 8th avatar of Vishnu. Located on the western coast of India, it is described as a marvel of architecture and spirituality, with 900,000 grand palaces, golden walls, emerald floors, and expansive gardens. The city floated on the edge of the earth, a jewel at the ocean's fingertips. But then, as the texts recount, something extraordinary happened. After Krishna departed from the world, Dwarka was engulfed by the sea. Was it divine retribution, a fulfillment of cosmic prophecy, or the poetic conclusion to an epic narrative? For centuries, the story of Dwarka was seen by many as just that, a story, a myth embedded in sacred literature, a metaphor for the impermanence of glory. But then, in the late 20th century, the ocean began to whisper secrets of its own. In 1983, marine archaeologists with the National Institute of Oceanography began exploratory dives near the modern-day city of Dwarka, located in the state of Gujarat. What they found beneath the waves was both unexpected and tantalizing. Just off the coast, under layers of sand and sediment, divers discovered what appeared to be man-made structures, stone walls, grids resembling streets, and remnants of buildings arranged with an order that suggested urban planning. Further investigations revealed anchors, pottery shards, and stone platforms. Sonar scans mapped rectangular formations and linear alignments. Could this be the legendary city? Carbon dating of artifacts suggested some elements were at least 3,000 to 3,500 years old. Placing them roughly within the time frame many scholars associate with Krishna's era, traditionally dated to the end of the Dvapara Yuga, around 3100 BC. Other material dated closer to 1500 BC, raising questions about layers of habitation and the evolution of coastal societies in ancient India. Was this the Dwarka of the texts, or another city lost to the sea? The Indian government declared the findings evidence of an ancient submerged city, and the announcement reignited debate across archaeological and religious circles alike. Pilgrims, historians, skeptics, and spiritual seekers descended on the site, or turned their attention to its growing file of underwater footage and research papers. And yet, as with many ancient mysteries, definitive answers remain elusive. Critics of the discovery argue that while the underwater structures are real, they may not be as old as claimed. Some suggest the formations are natural, shaped by erosion and marine geology. Others point out that sea level rise over the past several millennia, while significant, may not fully explain the sudden submergence of a massive metropolis. The question of Dwarka's disappearance is not merely scientific, it's philosophical, mythological, cultural. The Mahabharata describes Krishna's departure from the world as the end of an age, a moment of transition between cosmic cycles. With his passing, the divine balance was disrupted, and Dwarka, his city, his seat of power, was no longer meant to remain. The ocean rose to reclaim what belonged to the gods. Is this poetic metaphor, a symbol of detachment and the transience of even the greatest civilizations? Or does the ancient memory hide fragments of historical truth, of tectonic shifts, rising seas, and forgotten cities washed away by time? Around the world, there are stories of cities consumed by water. Atlantis, Heraklion, Pavlopetri, Port Royal. In each, the sea holds secrets, testaments to humanity's fragile place on the planet's shifting surface. Could Dwarka be India's echo of this timeless theme? Other researchers turn to satellite imagery and geological surveys. Some suggest that ancient rivers, now dry, once flowed into the Arabian Sea in this region, supporting the idea of a thriving port city that predated many recorded civilizations. Others point to potential connections between Dwarka and the Indus Valley civilization, suggesting a continuity or overlap in urban planning and maritime trade. And still, beneath the waves, the stones remain, covered in coral, worn by current, silent. What is certain is that something lies beneath the surface, something man-made, ancient, and complex. Whether it is the Dwarka of Krishna or a city lost to history and later folded into myth, it continues to invite wonder and investigation. Perhaps the real mystery is not just the physical location, but the way memory clings to myth, how stories endure across millennia, only to be echoed by archaeology, hinting that our ancestors remembered more than we often assume. Could the disappearance of Dwarka be a story of rising seas and shifting shores? Or is it something more, an intentional concealment, a divine act, a veiled transition from mortal domain to sacred remembrance? As the waters move gently over submerged stone, the question remains: did a god truly build a city on the edge of the world? And if so, what else might still sleep beneath the sea, waiting to be found? From the sunken stones of Dwarka, where seawater conceals a vanished past, we rise once again to solid ground, yet find ourselves facing another enigma that defies time itself. Here, standing in plain sight under the open sky of Delhi, is a monument to impermanence that seems permanent. A pillar that has defied not only centuries, but the very laws of nature. This is the Iron Pillar of Delhi, sometimes called the Ashoka Pillar, though its origins may stretch even further than the Mauryan emperor's storied reign. Nearly 7 meters tall and weighing over 6 tons, this ancient column of iron has stood for more than 1,600 years in the courtyard of the Qutb complex, exposed to monsoon rains, blistering summers, and the full passage of time. And yet, it has not rusted. Not in the way one might expect. While the surface bears the dark patina of age, the iron remains strong, largely untouched by corrosion. There is no flaking, no deep rust, no structural degradation. In a world where modern steel can crumble under less, the pillar's endurance invites a question that bridges metallurgy, history, and mystery. Who made it? How? And what secret does it hold? Inscribed in Sanskrit near the base is a dedication to a king named Chandra, believed by most scholars to be Chandragupta II, who ruled during the Gupta Empire in the 4th or early 5th century AD. The inscription praises his valor and divine support, but says nothing about the technology used to forge the pillar. No blueprint, no metallurgical formula, just a monument to power, grace, and glory. The material itself is extraordinary. Modern analysis has revealed that the pillar is composed of about 99.72% wrought iron, remarkably pure, especially for an era with no blast furnaces or industrial processing. The iron was forged not in a single cast, but through repeated hammering and welding of iron chunks at high temperatures. It is estimated that the iron workers may have used hundreds of individual pieces to create the seamless column. But even more baffling is its resistance to corrosion. Scientists who have studied the pillar found that its surface contains a thin protective film of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate, commonly called misawite, a compound that formed naturally over time and prevents further rust from developing. This film, barely 1/20th of a millimeter thick, is believed to be the result of a unique combination of impurities in the iron, high phosphorus content, and the dry climate of Delhi. Could this have happened by chance? Or did the ancient smiths, who produced similar, though less enduring, iron objects across India, understand something modern science only recently rediscovered? Some historians argue that the corrosion resistance is accidental, a fortunate convergence of high phosphorus iron and favorable weather. Others believe the metalworkers of the Gupta era had an empirical, if not scientific, knowledge of materials, that through centuries of trial and refinement, they developed methods that were eventually lost with time. But more speculative theories stretch further. Some claim that the pillar's origins predate even Chandragupta II, that it was transported from central India or even from a now-lost temple site, its original purpose tied not only to royal commemoration, but to spiritual energy. Legends abound in local lore, that the pillar was forged by gods, that it was once part of a celestial device, or that its position aligns with invisible currents of earth energy. One persistent folk belief says that if you can encircle the pillar with your arms while standing with your back to it, your wish will be granted, a tradition so popular that iron railings were eventually installed to prevent wear. Another tale tells of a spike once at the top, now missing, that connected heaven and earth, a symbolic axis mundi joining the material and spiritual worlds. These stories, while poetic, often distract from the deeper mystery, that the pillar stands as both an artifact and an unanswered question. At a time when corrosion-resistant alloys are the product of laboratory precision, how did ancient artisans achieve such results with basic tools and furnaces? Even now, efforts to replicate the anti-rust properties of the pillar using ancient methods have proven difficult. The exact ratios, forging temperatures, and cooling times remain unclear. Was it a singular achievement? A lost technique? Or does it hint at a wider, now erased body of knowledge in early Indian metallurgy? What makes the iron pillar more than a metallurgical marvel is its silence. It bears no boast of how it was made, no inscription on chemistry, no carved diagram of furnaces, only praise for a forgotten king, and the slow, steady refusal to decay. Could it be that this pillar was not just a monument, but a message? A quiet challenge across time, asking not only what we remember, but how much we've forgotten. In a world where rust devours bridges and skyscrapers, the iron pillar remains, calm, upright, enduring. And as we stand before it, the question remains, was this survival a stroke of fortune, or a glimpse into a knowledge we no longer possess? And if so, what other secrets lie sleeping in the metals of our past? From the silent strength of the Ashoka pillar, where metal resists time with quiet defiance, we now move into a mystery not forged in fire, but sung into being. A mystery not buried in stone, but lost in sound. It begins in the early morning stillness of the Indian subcontinent, thousands of years ago, when seers known as RSIs sat in meditation beneath trees, along rivers, and in open fields. What they heard in those moments, they did not claim to create, only to receive. This is the story of the Vedas, the most ancient scriptures of Hinduism. Texts that were never meant to be written, but remembered, chanted, transmitted not by ink and paper, but by the breath, the tongue, and the pulse of human voice. And yet, within this rich tradition lies a haunting question: what has been lost? The Vedas, as they survive today, are 4 in number: the Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharvaveda. They are vast, complex compositions of hymns, mantras, rituals, and philosophical insights. The Rigveda alone contains over 1,000 hymns, many of which date back to as early as 1500 BC, though some scholars suggest older roots, perhaps stretching deep into the 2nd millennium BC or even beyond. These are not books in the modern sense. They are structured layers of knowledge: the Samhitas, mantra collections; Brahmanas, ritual instructions; Aranyakas, meditative forest texts; and the Upanishads, philosophical contemplations. But the oral tradition that carried them was even more elaborate, painstaking in its precision. Reciters memorized not only the words, but the exact pitch, length, and intonation. Each syllable had to be perfect. Over generations, schools of Vedic chanting, known as shakas, emerged across India, each preserving a particular version of the text, passed master to student in an unbroken chain. And here lies the mystery. Ancient records and commentaries mention 1,180 shakas, that is, 1,180 distinct branches, or recensions of the Vedas. Each contained not only the main hymns, but a complete body of ritual knowledge, interpretations, and associated texts. Today, fewer than a dozen remain. what happened to the rest? Some blame the slow erosion of time, the natural attrition of oral traditions in a world that began to prioritize writing. Others point to historical upheaval, invasions, migrations, shifts in royal patronage. As kingdoms rose and fell, so too did the priestly lineages that preserved these teachings. But what was in those lost branches? What voices, what visions have disappeared? We do not know. Some scholars believe entire cosmologies, rituals, and philosophical systems may have been encoded in shakas that no longer exist. Others speculate that these missing texts may have held alternative theological insights, variations on creation myths, metaphysical models, or even technologies of consciousness that modern seekers are only beginning to rediscover through fragmented sources. The Karaka Katha Shaka, for instance, once linked to the Katha school of the Yajur Veda, is known only through passing references in later texts. The Sankayana Shaka, said to preserve a distinct version of the Rigveda, vanished centuries ago. There are fragments, quotes, and cross-references scattered across the Shrauta Sutras, the Griya Sutras, and the Vedangas, but never the full texts themselves. Could some of these texts still survive in hidden manuscripts, tucked away in remote monasteries or private collections? Or are they preserved in living memory, among communities that have kept their rituals far from the public eye? It's not impossible. India's oral traditions are among the most resilient in human history. In some villages of Kerala, Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh, Vedic chanting continues exactly as it has for over 2 millennia. The Nambudiri Brahmins of Kerala, for example, still chant rare versions of the Taittiriya and Jaiminya Samhitas, complete with intonations not found in the printed editions. But even in these cases, much has been lost. The Jaiminya Shaka, once widespread across India, is now preserved by just a handful of families. The Atharva Veda, considered the most esoteric of the 4, was once transmitted through 9 distinct shakas. Today, only 2 remain, and even they survive in fragmentary form. The question grows heavier. What was contained in the other 7? The Atharva Veda is known for its focus on incantations, healing, curses, and protective rituals. Could the lost shakas have held further insights into early Indian medicine, or even ancient sound technologies, chanting systems designed to influence the body, the mind, or the environment? Some researchers have drawn speculative parallels between Vedic meter and mathematical codes, suggesting that the rhythm and structure of these hymns may have encoded more than just religious meaning, perhaps even astronomical or acoustic knowledge, lost to time but still embedded in the forgotten verses. Others propose more mystical possibilities. In certain Upanishads, the Vedas are described not as human compositions, but as Shruti, that which is heard from the cosmic sound. Could the lost texts have offered alternate ways to access this primordial vibration? Were they maps, not of geography, but of the inner universe? Without the texts, we can only imagine. And perhaps that is part of their purpose, to remind us that not all knowledge was meant to be held in the hand, that some truths pass like sound on the wind, preserved only in silence or in memory. Today, scholars, monks, linguists, and digital archivists are racing to preserve what remains. Yet even as we digitize the Vedas, record the voices of the last reciters, and translate line by line, the shadow of what was lost lingers. Were the missing shakas mere variations, or were they the keys to a broader vision of reality, ritual, and cosmic order? And if they are ever rediscovered, what might we learn, not just about ancient India, but about ourselves? Perhaps, somewhere in a palm leaf bundle untouched for centuries, in a cave high in the Himalayas, or deep within the memory of a vanishing lineage, the sound still waits, unwritten, unspoken, not lost, but not yet heard. From the vanished verses of the Vedas, echoes carried on the breath of sages, we now step into the presence of something solid, tangible, etched in stone, yet wrapped in mystery. A single imprint, simple in shape, profound in meaning, resting atop a mist-shrouded peak, worn smooth by centuries of touch and prayer, revered across faiths, across time. This is Sri Pada, the sacred footprint. Located in Sri Lanka, atop a solitary mountain rising over 7,300 feet into the clouds, lies a rock formation unlike any other. At its summit is a hollowed indentation, about 5 feet long, resembling the shape of a human foot. It is known by many names: Adam's Peak in Islamic and Christian tradition, Sri Pada, sacred footprint, to Buddhists, and Samanalakanda, the butterfly mountain, by locals who speak of spirits and winged migrations. But whose footprint is it? That question has never had a single answer, and perhaps that is the most mysterious part. To Buddhists, it is the footprint of the Buddha, left during one of his 3 legendary visits to Sri Lanka. They say he pressed it into the earth as a blessing to the island, a silent teaching engraved in stone. The pilgrimage up Adam's Peak is one of devotion and awakening. Pilgrims climb in the pre-dawn darkness, ascending thousands of steps through the jungle, hoping to catch the sunrise from the summit. There, the footprint rests beneath a shrine. Bells ring for those who reach the top. Offerings are left in silence. The horizon burns gold. But for Hindus, the mark belongs to Shiva. Known here as Shivanolipatha Malai, it is believed to be an imprint left during a cosmic dance, the dance of Ananda Tandava, the rhythm of creation and destruction. The footprint is a trace of divinity in motion, a moment frozen in stone from the eternal cycle of time. In the Islamic tradition, the mountain is Jabal Adam, the mountain of Adam. It is said to be the very spot where Adam, cast out of paradise, first set foot on earth. The footprint is a symbol of humanity's beginning, the first sorrowful step upon mortal ground. Some Islamic legends say Adam stood here, weeping for 100 years. Others claim he left an enormous print because he was created far taller than modern humans. Even Christians have looked to the mountain with reverence. Portuguese colonists in the 16th century believed the mark was Adam's, and that the mountain itself was the location of Eden, its lush forested slopes rising from the waters like a final remnant of paradise. One location, one footprint, multiple stories. What does it mean for a single stone impression to hold such layered devotion? The footprint itself, sheltered beneath a shrine and visible only to pilgrims and caretakers, is carved deeper than natural erosion would suggest. Some historians believe it was modified over centuries, perhaps originally a natural formation, later enhanced by human hands to resemble the divine. Others argue it is entirely man-made, deliberately shaped as a sacred symbol for early pilgrims. But even if carved, its existence high atop a solitary mountain raises deeper questions. Why here? Why this place? The mountain has drawn pilgrims for over 1,000 years. Ancient texts reference it. Foreign explorers wrote of it in awe. Marco Polo mentioned a great mountain in Ceylon, with a sacred footprint revered by all faiths. Early Arab travelers called it the Mountain of Serendib, noting its spiritual power and the mixture of people who came from different lands to visit it. Could there have been something about this peak, its shape, its height, its isolation, that made it a natural magnet for myth? Or was it chosen precisely because it was difficult to reach, because the journey up was part of the transformation? The footprint's exact origin remains unclear. There are no inscriptions identifying its creator, no ancient carving nearby to give context. Some geologists maintain that it is a simple indentation worn by time and softened by faith. Others say it mirrors similar footprint stones found in other cultures, symbolic impressions of saints, sages, or deities, meant to inspire humility and awe. But this footprint is different. It has survived conquest, colonization, and reinterpretation. It has been absorbed by multiple religions, but claimed by none alone. Is that the footprint's secret? That it belongs to everyone? Perhaps the most mysterious aspect of Sri Pada is not whose foot made the mark, but why so many still believe it matters. The world changes, myths fade, yet here, high in the clouds, a simple hollow in stone continues to draw hearts upward, not toward answers, but toward wonder. And perhaps that is the point, that the footprint is not a signature, but an invitation to ascend, to reflect, to ask, what power does belief have to shape stone? What is left behind when the divine walks the earth? And what if, hidden within this single imprint, weathered by centuries of wind, touch, and rain, is the echo of something we all remember, but no longer recognize? As dawn breaks over the misty plains of ancient Bharat, the sun rises slowly behind temple spires and the jagged silhouette of forgotten ruins. The air hums with stillness, broken only by birdsong and the rustle of leaves. But in the pages of ancient Sanskrit texts, passed down through chants and memory, there are descriptions of something that does not fit this earthly calm, something that defies gravity, that roars, spins, and soars across the sky. They are called Vimanas. Across the vast body of Hindu scriptures, especially in the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and several Puranas, there appear strange and vivid accounts of flying machines. Not metaphor, but machines, described in technical terms, with details of materials, propulsion, weaponry, and even aerial combat. The Pushpaka Vimana, for example, is mentioned in the Ramayana. Described as a flying palace that belonged first to the demon king Ravana and later to Lord Rama, it is said to have moved at the will of the rider, glittered like the sun, and carried many passengers. The text speaks of it ascending into the sky with a thunderous sound, able to travel great distances in very little time. But what exactly were these Vimanas? Mythical metaphors? Poetic imagination? Or, more provocatively, descriptions of ancient technology? Some scholars argue that the Vimanas were symbolic, representing spiritual elevation or divine authority. After all, ancient epics are often layered with metaphor. Flying chariots may be no more literal than winged horses or fire-breathing dragons in other traditions. But others have taken the descriptions more seriously. In texts like the Samarangana Sutradhara, attributed to King Bhoja in the 11th century AD, there are chapters devoted to the design of aerial vehicles. The text describes a Vimana as made of light and durable materials, equipped with engines, and capable of moving in multiple directions, including vertically. It even mentions fire and mercury as part of its propulsion system. More curiously, the Vaimanika Shastra, a controversial Sanskrit manuscript supposedly dictated to a mystic in the early 20th century, provides diagrams and detailed instructions for constructing Vimanas, complete with flight manuals, pilot attire, and lists of metals and fuels. While most modern scientists dismiss the text as a 20th century fabrication, some researchers note that the ideas it presents seem too advanced for their time, if they were purely imagined. Could these flying machines be echoes of a lost era? Evidence, perhaps, of an advanced civilization predating what we now understand of ancient India. It's a theory that has gained traction in fringe and speculative circles. Proponents of ancient astronaut theory often point to the Vimanas as early examples of contact with extraterrestrial technology. If not divine, then could these flying craft have belonged to visitors from beyond, recorded in the only language ancient observers had available: poetry, myth, and scripture? And then there are those who believe the Vimanas were not alien, but human, products of a forgotten age of advanced science that was later wiped out in cataclysm or war. The Mahabharata describes what appear to be powerful weapons, energy beams, and devastating explosions, interpreted by some as descriptions of ancient warfare on a scale far beyond bows and arrows. Of course, mainstream historians offer a different view. To them, the Vimanas are literary devices, no more literal than any other fantastical element in epic poetry. Ancient India, they argue, was rich in imagination and symbolism. Descriptions of flying machines were an extension of the same creativity that gave rise to celestial beings, demon armies, and oceans of milk. Still, questions remain. Why are the descriptions of the Vimanas so precise? Why do some texts use mechanical vocabulary, describing joints, engines, and levers? Why do multiple sources across centuries seem to reference these craft independently? Could there be a deeper memory embedded in these texts, half lost, half preserved? A remnant of something once known, but no longer understood? Archaeological evidence remains elusive. No metallic wreckage or ancient landing pads have ever been discovered. And yet, ancient temples across India are adorned with carvings that seem strangely aerodynamic: cone-shaped domes, spinning wheels, sky chariots. Coincidence, or forgotten memory carved into stone? In Ellora, in Hampi, in Khajuraho, one finds intricate stone depictions that resemble flying craft, not proof, but perhaps echoes. The Vimanas, if they ever existed in physical form, have long since vanished. No engines remain, no fuel sources, no blueprints we can verify. Only words, layered in Sanskrit, passed from sage to disciple, copied by hand through fire, war, and empire. And so the mystery lingers. What were the Vimanas? Flights of imagination, or flights of another kind? Were they metaphorical, spiritual, symbolic of humanity's eternal yearning to transcend the limits of the earth? Or were they machines, real, functional, and now forgotten, waiting to be rediscovered in the sands of time? Perhaps in the future, we will unlock some hidden pattern in the ancient hymns. Perhaps technology will one day mirror what these texts once described. Or perhaps we are already looking at it, but do not yet recognize what we see. And as we peer once more into the skies, scanning for life beyond, the question hangs in the air, quiet, persistent, and unresolved. Did the ancients already fly? And if so, what else did they leave behind, hidden in plain sight, waiting to rise again? From the soaring sky chariots of the Vimanas, where mythology brushes the edge of forgotten science, we now return to Earth, to a sacred relic believed to carry not power or technology, but presence. An object small in size, yet revered across continents, clutched in the hands of kings, guarded by monks, fought over by empires. A single fragment of a life once lived, and now, perhaps, lost. This is the mystery of the Buddha's tooth relic, a sacred canine believed to have been taken from the funeral pyre of Siddhartha Gautama himself more than 2,500 years ago. Today, the most famous shrine claiming possession of this relic is located in Kandy, Sri Lanka, within the golden-roofed Sri Dalada Maligawa, or Temple of the Sacred Tooth. It is a place of deep reverence and national pride. Each year, during the Asala Perahera festival, the relic is paraded through the streets on the back of a richly adorned elephant, accompanied by dancers, drummers, and torchbearers. Yet the relic itself is rarely seen. It is kept hidden, sealed within nested reliquaries, golden, jeweled containers shaped like dagobas, or stupas. But behind this visible veneration lies a trail of questions, because the story of the tooth is not singular. It is plural. Multiple sites across Asia claim to possess it, or parts of it. In China, Burma, Myanmar, Laos, and India, relics are enshrined, displayed, or spoken of with equal certainty. And over the centuries, the relic has vanished, reappeared, been destroyed, stolen, duplicated, and hidden, sometimes all in a single generation. What, then, is the true history of the Buddha's tooth? And where is it now? According to early chronicles like the Dathavamsa and the Mahavamsa, the relic was smuggled to Sri Lanka from India in the 4th century AD. Carried by Princess Hemamali and her husband Prince Dantha, the tooth was concealed in her hair to protect it from a collapsing political landscape. They brought it to the island kingdom of Anuradhapura, where it was welcomed by the king and enshrined with royal honors. From that point forward, possession of the relic became more than devotion. It was sovereignty. To hold the tooth was to hold the right to rule, but such a symbol invites danger. In 1283, the relic was captured by South Indian invaders and taken to Madurai. Accounts diverge here. Some say it was returned. Others claim it was never recovered. In later centuries, colonial powers arrived, and with them came new threats. In the 16th century, the Portuguese, intent on stamping out what they viewed as idolatry, claimed to have seized the tooth, brought it to Goa, and burned it publicly. A Catholic priest reportedly crushed the charred remains and cast them into a river. And yet, curiously, the relic persisted. By the 17th century, it was once again enshrined in Sri Lanka, first in Kota, then in Kandy, where it remains to this day. Was the Portuguese relic a copy? A decoy? Had the true relic been hidden, as some believe, in a secret chamber known only to the highest monks? This question reveals a deeper layer of the mystery. Throughout Buddhist history, relics have often been multiplied. Some traditions accept the possibility that sacred objects, especially those tied to the Buddha, can manifest in multiple places simultaneously, or be replicated without diminishing their sanctity. The tooth in Kandy may not be the only one, but it may still be authentic in a different sense. In China, the Famen temple claims to hold a phalange bone and a tooth of the Buddha, discovered in a hidden underground crypt opened only after an earthquake in 1987. In Myanmar, the Shwedagon Pagoda is said to house relics from 4 Buddhas, including hairs and possibly a tooth. Other sites, some well-known, others obscure, make similar claims, each surrounded by layers of tradition and mystery. So which, if any, is the original? The answer may depend on what one means by original. Is the value of a relic in its material continuity, from cremation fire to present shrine, or in the unbroken chain of faith and meaning that surrounds it? Or is there another possibility altogether? Some scholars have suggested that the original tooth relic, if it existed, was lost long ago. That all existing claims are ceremonial, symbolic recreations designed to preserve continuity in ritual and devotion. Others propose that the original relic was divided, and what remains are its fragments, real but partial, like a shattered vessel held together by memory. And then, there are more speculative voices. Some theorists suggest that the relics were never meant to be physical remains at all, that they were encoded symbols, teachings made tangible only to aid meditation and spiritual focus. That what is now housed in golden stupas might not be a tooth, but a truth, forgotten in form, remembered in reverence. And yet, the mystery deepens with every retelling. Because even today, no clear image of the Kandy relic is publicly available. Its dimensions are said to be unusual, too large to be human. Some who have seen it claim it resembles an elephant's molar. Is this a clue, a symbolic substitution, or simply a relic reshaped by centuries of handling and belief? What cannot be denied is the power of the object. Whether tooth or talisman, it draws millions. Kings have risen and fallen over it. Cities have been built around it. Wars have been fought and pilgrimages undertaken for the chance to be near it. And so we are left with a sacred contradiction, a relic that is both there and not there, visible yet hidden, claimed yet elusive. Is the Buddha's tooth still intact? Has it been multiplied, misidentified, or mystified beyond recognition? Or is the real relic something that can never be found in a reliquary at all? Something preserved not in bone or ash, but in the quiet devotion of those who continue to climb temple steps, year after year, to kneel before an unopened box and whisper prayers into the silence. As the soft glow of temple lamps fades and the mystery of the Buddha's lost relic disappears once more into golden silence, we turn now toward the ancient fires of Persia, where flame was not just light, but symbol, sacred, eternal, where truth was a path carved between the forces of darkness and light, and where knowledge, divine knowledge, was once said to be contained in hundreds of holy texts, most of which are now lost. These are the lost books of Zoroaster, a vanished library of the world's oldest known monotheistic religion and one of the great literary disappearances of antiquity. Zoroastrianism, the faith founded by the prophet Zarathustra, known to the Greeks as Zoroaster, arose in the Iranian plateau sometime before the 6th century BC, though many scholars believe its roots go far deeper, possibly as early as 1200 BC. It would go on to influence Judaism, Christianity, and Islam with its core ideas: a single creator God, Ahura Mazda, the eternal battle between good and evil, the concept of free will, judgment after death, and the eventual triumph of light. But if Zoroastrianism helped shape the philosophical foundations of the modern world, what happened to its own foundational texts? According to Zoroastrian tradition, the teachings of Zarathustra were once compiled in 21 nasks, books that encompassed hymns, liturgy, law, medicine, astronomy, cosmology, ethics, and esoteric knowledge. These were not brief scrolls or chants. They were comprehensive volumes, said to contain divine insight revealed directly to the prophet. Today, only fragments survive. The existing Zoroastrian scriptures, what we now call the Avesta, are a shadow of this once grand corpus. The preserved texts include the Gathas, the hymns believed to be Zarathustra's own words, the Yasna, liturgical rites, the Visparad, Vendidad, and a handful of other pieces. But where are the rest? The Denkard, a 9th century Zoroastrian text, offers a clue. It tells us that the full Avesta was once written on 12,000 cowhides, an unimaginable scale, inscribed in gold ink and stored in the royal archives of Persepolis during the Achaemenid Empire. If this account holds truth, then what was lost was not merely sacred, but immense. The destruction came in waves. When Alexander the Great invaded Persia in 330 BC and burned Persepolis, Zoroastrians believe the Avesta was one of the casualties, scattered, looted, and burned. Later, during the Seleucid and Parthian eras, oral traditions kept parts alive, but many texts were lost, deliberately or through neglect. When the Sasanian Empire, 224 to 651 AD, revived Zoroastrianism as a state religion, efforts were made to reconstruct the canon, yet much was already beyond recovery. Then came the Arab conquest of Persia in the 7th century AD. Zoroastrian temples were destroyed or repurposed, and remaining texts fell victim to political and religious upheaval. By the time later Zoroastrian communities, like the Parsis of India, re-established themselves, only a fraction of the original writings remained. But what was lost? Among the most intriguing missing texts are the more mystical and philosophical nasks. Some scholars believe they may have contained teachings on cosmology, cycles of time, the nature of divine beings, and advanced ethical doctrines. Others point to possible medical and astronomical knowledge, preserved in encoded language or allegory. Could these books have rivaled other ancient texts like the Vedas, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the Dead Sea Scrolls in scope and insight? Even the remaining texts hint at what's missing. The Yasna, for example, refers to rituals no longer practiced. The Vendidad outlines laws and myths that seem to respond to older, now absent writings. The gaps are visible, like missing verses in a familiar song. In the quiet libraries of Yazd and Navsari, where Zoroastrian texts are still copied and preserved by hand, there are whispers of other scrolls, untranslated, locked in Old Avestan or Pahlavi, and barely understood. Some scholars believe that portions of the lost Nasks might survive within the commentaries, waiting to be identified, pieced together, and reinterpreted. And then there are more speculative claims. Over the centuries, rumors have surfaced of hidden Zoroastrian texts buried beneath temples, walled inside remote fire sanctuaries, or even protected by underground brotherhoods of priests. In 19th-century British colonial records, travelers in Persia reported hearing of secret manuscripts held by families who feared persecution if their existence became known. Could a full or partial copy of one of the lost Nasks still exist, forgotten in a sealed chest, hidden in a mountain cave, or collecting dust in a private archive mislabeled and unread? It would not be the first time such a rediscovery occurred. The Dead Sea Scrolls emerged from the Judean desert after millennia. The Nag Hammadi library was uncovered in Egypt by a farmer digging for fertilizer. The Famen temple crypt in China yielded Buddhist relics sealed in stone for 1,000 years. Why not the lost books of Zoroaster? But perhaps the deeper mystery lies not in what was written, but in what was meant to be remembered. For Zoroastrianism has always emphasized Asha, truth, order, cosmic harmony. The sacred fire burns not to illuminate the past, but to guide the living. Might the missing books, then, be less about content and more about a forgotten way of seeing the world? Still, the question persists. What secrets were burned in the fires of Persepolis? What hymns, philosophies, and forgotten sciences vanished when empires crumbled and libraries turned to ash? Were these texts mere legends, or are fragments still waiting, somewhere, to be found? And if so, when they are uncovered, what might they reveal about a time when wisdom was not just written, but lived in the flame? From the smoldering ruins of lost Persian texts, where fire was both sacred and consuming, we travel east, across mountains and steppes, to the great river valleys of ancient China. Here, in the dusty plains near Anyang, beneath layers of soil and forgotten tombs, archaeologists uncovered not scrolls or temples, but fragments of bone, burned, cracked, inscribed with characters that whisper across millennia. They are known as the oracle bones, and they may represent one of the oldest written conversations between humans and the divine. At first glance, they seem humble, pieces of turtle plastrons or ox scapulae, yellowed with age, bearing delicate lines of early Chinese script. But look closer, and a stranger truth emerges. These bones were once the medium through which the rulers of the Shang dynasty, who ruled parts of the Yellow River Valley from around 1600 to 1046 BC, sought the guidance of the spirits. The process was ritualistic, almost surgical. The bones were cleaned, prepared, and sometimes hollowed out. Questions were carved into them, formal, careful inquiries etched by scribes in an early form of Chinese writing known as jiagyuan. A royal diviner, often under the direction of the king himself, would then apply intense heat to specific points on the reverse side, using a heated rod or metal tool. The bone would crack, sometimes audibly, producing fissures whose shapes were believed to reveal answers from the ancestors. or from the heavens? The subjects of the questions ranged from the mundane to the profound. Will it rain on the day of the ritual? Should we send soldiers to the eastern frontier? Will the child in the queen's womb be a boy? Is the king's toothache the result of an ancestor's displeasure? Some bones contain both the question and the answer. Others even record the eventual outcome, creating a rare, ancient record of prediction versus reality. But what makes the oracle bones more than an anthropological curiosity is the scale and complexity of what they preserve. Tens of thousands have been unearthed at Anyang, near what is believed to have been the last capital of the Shang dynasty. Together, they form not just a record of prophecy, but the earliest known foundation of the Chinese writing system, characters still recognizable in modern Mandarin today. And yet, their rediscovery was almost accidental. In the late 19th century, Chinese scholars began noticing strange dragon bones being sold in apothecaries. These bones, ground into powder, were believed to hold medicinal properties. One scholar, Wang Yirong, realized that the strange scratches on their surface were actually writing unlike anything then known. What followed was a rush to locate the original source, an excavation that would eventually uncover the royal tombs of the Shang kings, and thousands of oracle bones buried in pits and sacrificial altars. But as with so many ancient practices, the deeper one looks, the more unsettling the mystery becomes. What precisely were the diviners seeing in the cracks? Did the shapes trigger intuitive judgments, or were they interpreted through a complex lost code? Why did they believe the ancestors could speak through heat and bone? And could this method of communication, through flame and fracture, have been part of an even older, pan-Eurasian practice, now forgotten? Some scholars suggest that the Shang oracle bones reflect not just religious ritual, but early statecraft, that the king's role as chief diviner placed him as the intermediary between humanity and the unseen world, not just in a spiritual sense, but in political reality. Every decision of consequence passed through this channel. It was not merely a superstition, it was government. Yet others see something stranger. The precision of the inscriptions, the repetition of certain character forms, and the almost mathematical patterning of some questions have led a few researchers to propose that the bones may have also encoded astronomical data, agricultural cycles, or even cryptic historical events, records of dynastic power struggles disguised as divine dialogue. Even more speculative are the theories that link the oracle bones to wider systems of ancient knowledge. Some propose that the practice of divining through cracks has parallels in Mesopotamian hepatoscopy, where priests read the livers of sacrificed animals, or in Roman augury, where birds and lightning were consulted before battle. Were these parallel inventions, or echoes of a shared, long-lost method of interpreting the world? The Shang dynasty eventually fell to the Zhou, and over time, the use of oracle bones faded. Later dynasties embraced written texts, astrology, and cosmology. But the bones never fully disappeared from cultural memory. Their legacy lived on in script, in ritual, and, perhaps, in a persistent sense, that reality is not always what it seems. That truth might not be read in ink alone, but in the patterns of fire, fracture, and bone. And today, more than 3,000 years later, the mystery continues. Some oracle bones remain untranslated. Others are locked in private collections, far from scholarly eyes. Each one is a fragment of a forgotten conversation, half of a question, half of an answer, with no way to hear the voice that once spoke through heat and crack. Could there be more? Unexcavated caches of bones beneath ancient temples or buried in sacrificial pits? Could we one day find the earliest questions ever asked, not in stone tablets or clay, but in these fragile remnants of burnt bone? And what might those questions reveal about a time when kings knelt beside fire, bone in hand, and listened for the voice of the unseen? Perhaps the oracle bones were never about knowing the future, but about remembering the invisible threads that hold the present together. And if that's true, what else might still lie hidden beneath the dust of ages, waiting to speak again? As the brittle oracle bones of ancient China fall silent once more, bearing their cryptic truths from a vanished world, we shift from the stillness of bone to the motion of the soul, from questions carved in fire to answers sought in movement. In the shadowed halls of Sufi lodges, under candlelight and vaulted stone, another kind of mystery unfolds, one not spoken, but danced. This is the enigma of the Sufi whirling dervishes, and the sacred spiral they trace toward the divine. Step into a dimly lit chamber in Konya, Turkey. A hush settles over the room as musicians begin to play. Reed flute, frame drum, and tambour, weaving a hypnotic melody that feels older than memory. Figures in long white robes and tall felt hats enter in silence. They bow, circle, and finally begin to spin. Slowly at first, then with growing intensity. Arms outstretched, right palm facing the sky, left palm turned to the earth. The fabric of their skirts flares outward, becoming a ring of white light. They spin, and spin, and spin. But what are they reaching for? Known as the Sema ceremony, this whirling ritual is performed by the Mevlevi order of Sufis, followers of the 13th century Persian mystic and poet Jalal al-Din Rumi. It is not performance, they insist, but prayer. An inward journey through outward motion, a way of silencing the ego to feel, however briefly, the eternal presence of God. Yet for outsiders, the mystery remains. How can such a physical act, spinning for 20, 30, even 40 minutes without pause, bring about spiritual awakening? Why does this particular form of movement appear again and again in mystical traditions across cultures? And what secrets might lie encoded in the very geometry of the whirl? The origins of the Sufi whirling tradition are difficult to pin down. Rumi himself is said to have begun spinning spontaneously in a marketplace in Konya, overcome by the rhythms of divine love. According to legend, as he turned, he heard the music of the universe, the planets, the angels, the name of God. For Rumi and his disciples, the spinning was not symbolic. It was transformative, a way of tuning the body to the celestial harmony that underlies all creation. From this moment emerged an entire spiritual discipline. The dervishes train not only their bodies, but their hearts. Before they whirl, they fast, pray, and study. Each movement in the Sema has meaning. The bow to begin is an acknowledgement of unity. The circling steps represent the journey through spiritual stations. The spin itself becomes an axis of surrender. But science, too, has looked at this practice with fascination. Neurologists have noted that extended whirling can induce altered states of consciousness, disrupting normal brain patterns and stimulating regions linked to emotion, balance, and self-awareness. The dervish, while spinning, may lose ordinary sensory perception, but gain a heightened state of presence. Some compare it to meditation, others to trance, still others to what modern psychology calls flow. But are we simply mapping poetry onto neurons? Some scholars have pointed to possible links between Sufi whirling and older pre-Islamic rituals involving dance and ecstatic movement. In Central Asia, where Sufism took deep root, shamanic traditions included circular motion, rhythmic drumming, and rotational trance. Could the Sema have absorbed and sanctified something much older, an ancient technology of spirit repurposed for a new religious framework? More speculative theories go further. They suggest the whirling dervish is not merely a religious figure, but an unwitting expression of cosmic principles. The spiral, after all, is everywhere. galaxies, hurricanes, nautilus shells, DNA. The act of spinning aligns with the motion of the Earth, the orbit of the stars. Could it be that the dervishes, in their simplicity, are imitating something vast, something universal? And then there is the question of what they see. Dervishes speak of entering a state beyond thought, where identity dissolves and a presence, beyond words, fills the space within. Rumi's poetry reflects this with lines that seem to come from beyond the veil. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? Is the Sema a key to that open door? A pattern that leads to presence? Yet, for all its beauty and apparent meaning, the Sufi whirling ritual has not always been accepted. At times, it was banned. The Mevlevi order was dissolved under Turkey's secular reforms in the early 20th century, and many saw the Sema as an archaic relic. Even within Islamic orthodoxy, some scholars have viewed it with suspicion. Too mystical, too sensual, too far from the law. But it survived, quietly, then publicly. Today, Sufi whirling is practiced around the world, sometimes as sacred rite, sometimes as cultural performance. But the mystery remains intact. Why does the human heart respond to spinning in this way? What do the dervishes touch when they turn? And more intriguingly, could the body, through movement alone, reach places the mind cannot? The Sema ceremony continues to invite awe not just because it is beautiful, but because it points to something beyond itself, something ancient, wordless, and yet universal. A turning that never ends. And perhaps, if we look closely enough, we too might begin to sense what Rumi once heard in that marketplace long ago. Not a sound, but a silence behind the sound. Not motion, but stillness inside the spin. A mystery that waits, not to be solved, but to be entered. As the dervish slows his turning and the Sufi chamber falls once more into stillness, our journey now shifts westward, across continents, across centuries, to a dense grove in upstate New York. The year is 1823. It is early morning. The forest is quiet, except for the rustling of leaves and the slow dawn wind through the trees. A teenage boy named Joseph Smith kneels alone on the earth, praying, searching, waiting. And then, so the story goes, the ground opens to mystery. There, buried in a stone box beneath a hill called Cumorah, were plates, shining plates of gold, etched with strange characters, bound in rings, heavy, sacred, and sealed. According to Smith, these plates contained a record of ancient prophets who had lived on the American continent long before Columbus. Their language, reformed Egyptian. Their message, a testament of Jesus Christ. These were the golden plates of the Book of Mormon. Today, they remain among the most controversial and enigmatic artifacts in American religious history, revered by millions, doubted by many, and seen by only a few. Their origin, existence, and disappearance continue to raise questions that blur the lines between faith, history, and myth. What were the golden plates? Where did they come from? And where did they go? According to Joseph Smith's own account, the angel Moroni appeared to him and revealed the location of the plates, but he was not permitted to take them right away. Over the course of 4 years, he returned annually to the hill, preparing himself spiritually for the task. At last, in 1827, he was given the plates, along with 2 special objects, interpreters called the Urim and Thummim, which he claimed helped him translate the ancient script into English. The translation, he said, was accomplished through divine means. In some accounts, he looked into the interpreters, like a kind of seer stone. In others, he placed a stone into a hat and dictated the words as they appeared to him. The result was the Book of Mormon, first published in 1830. But almost as quickly as they appeared, the plates vanished. Smith said that after the translation was completed, the angel Moroni returned to reclaim them. They were taken back, sealed from view, and no longer accessible. What remains today is the book they are said to have produced, but not the plates themselves. Skeptics argue this is a convenient absence. How can such extraordinary claims be accepted without physical evidence? Yet believers point to the testimony of witnesses. 11 men, known as the 3 witnesses and the 8 witnesses, signed published statements asserting they had seen, and in some cases, handled, the plates. Some claimed they saw them with their own eyes. Others said they were shown in a vision. But even these testimonies are complex. Over time, some of the witnesses left the early church and their relationships with Joseph Smith fractured. And yet, remarkably, most never retracted their statements about the plates. So, what were these plates? Were they real, physical objects, a vision, a symbolic experience, or something else entirely? Descriptions vary. Some said the plates were about 6 inches wide, 8 inches long, and 6 inches thick, bound in 3 rings. They were described as being gold in appearance, but not necessarily solid gold, perhaps an alloy. If real, such an object would be extraordinarily heavy. Could Smith have fabricated them? If so, how did he convince others they were real? And what of the translation process, so different from traditional linguistic methods? Then, there is the language itself. Reformed Egyptian is unknown to mainstream scholars. No other examples have ever been found. Some suggest this was a script invented by ancient American peoples, later lost. Others argue it was a symbolic term, not meant to correspond to a known historical language. The Book of Mormon contains names, genealogies, and complex narratives involving civilizations such as the Nephites and Lamanites, allegedly descendants of Israelites who fled Jerusalem around 600 BC and traveled to the Americas. Archaeologists and historians have long debated the lack of corroborating evidence for these civilizations. While there are rich and ancient cultures in pre-Columbian America, such as the Maya and Olmec, no definitive connection has been made to the peoples described in the Book of Mormon. Critics see this as a major challenge. Believers see it as an open field, evidence still waiting to be uncovered, or perhaps misunderstood. More speculative voices have suggested that the golden plates may have never been earthly objects in the ordinary sense, that they were real, but not bound by the physical laws we understand. Objects of divine origin, existing for a time within our world, but not fully of it. Others point to ancient traditions in which sacred knowledge is hidden in golden books or metal scrolls, found, read, and then concealed. Stories of buried records appear in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic apocrypha, as well as in Mesoamerican myth. Could Joseph Smith's account be a modern echo of this much older pattern? Even within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the golden plates are treated with reverent silence. No replicas, no physical relics remain. What endures is the book, the belief, the idea that sacred history may lie just beneath the surface of the world, waiting for someone to uncover it. And so, the mystery remains. Were the plates ever truly there, buried under a hill in rural New York? Were they a divine vision given form? Were they real, hidden once more? Or is the real mystery not the plates themselves, but the power they continue to hold across generations, languages, and lands? Perhaps the truth, like the plates, is something we're still translating, one word at a time, one question at a time, towards something that still gleams in the dark.